Once again, we are back with another episode of The Upgrade. My name is Gary Muttley. He is the one and only
Len Carmichael, Landmine Studios. What's happening, Gary?
Well, you know, it's a rare day without snow, but they're getting snow in Texas and other strange places where they don't usually get snow. So, I guess
climate change is not real. It's not real. So we shouldn't even worry about this. We shouldn't be worried about a crazy snowstorm throughout a section of America that absolutely never gets snow. What are you going to tell me next? It's raining in Southern California? What's going on?
Actually, I was going to tell you that I just read something online that apparently this is all Joe Biden's fault. And I'm not even kidding. Something one of my friends just posted this. 3.5 million people without power in Texas. Joe Biden's dark winter has arrived. And the whole thing about how his dark winter statement was not a random thought. It was him talking about what is to come.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And
it's always something with people. It's always something.
We've gone from QAnon to Joe Biden causing power outages. I give up.
I did hear that Seattle got a snowstorm too, and they never get snow because they're too close to the ocean. But for some reason, it snowed in Seattle this time.
Did Florida get snow?
I hope Florida falls off of the U.S. Can it just float out to sea?
Did Puerto Rico get snow?
Can we trade Florida for Puerto Rico, please?
I mean, they want to be the 51st state. We could just be like, hey, you guys want to be just number 50 and we'll cut this other one loose?
That's what I'm talking about. Let's just cut them loose and bring the other ones in. Let's just pretend Florida does not even exist. It's just a blank spot on the map. You just can't even get to it. The only place that you can even get to, they have to build an actual airport at Disney just because there are going to be a lot of people that still want to go to Disney. And you can only fly to Disney. You cannot go in or out of Florida otherwise.
Disney just becomes its own sovereign space.
Yeah. Within a vast wasteland of nothing.
So we have a guest, but before we get to the guest, I just want to mention one thing, which is not a paid advertisement, but I saw this today, and I have to mention it because he's somebody we talked about before. Apparently, Comedy Central on Friday night is debuting a documentary about Patrice O'Neal.
Oh, I'm in. I'm 100% in.
Yeah.
I'm ready for it right now.
I saw that and I was like, oh, wow. I need to be on that immediately.
Yeah, I mean, all right, if it wasn't going to be on Comedy Central, it would probably be better than it's going to be because it's going to be sanitized for television. If it was on like HBO or Showtime, it'd be a little bit better just because then, Norton and the guys could actually really say what they feel.
I was wondering about that because I know they used to do the after midnight thing.
Right.
And I wonder what time. Well, it says it's going to be on 10 p.m. Comedy Central Friday night. So who knows? Maybe they'll bend the rules a little bit. I hope so.
I hope so.
I would love to hear all those dudes cut loose.
Absolutely.
Because I think Bill Burr and Colin Quinn are going to be on it.
Okay.
I just pulled up the news story. Of course, they got to jam it with tons of ads and ruin it.
I mean, I know that Bill Burr was his dude, so that was like his best friend.
Oh, yeah. A couple of Colin Quinn also. They were all part of that crew. And Kevin Hart's going to be on it too.
All right.
That midget.
Yo, he might be short, but he's kind of funny at times.
It's easy to be funny when you're short.
Well, you got a lot of making up to do.
Oh boy! Well, you got to do something to draw attention.
Yeah.
So nobody steps on you.
I mean, it's not like you're lacking angst when you're short.
That's true too.
You have every reason to be angry.
You definitely be angry. Oh my God. Anyway, we have a guest this week, and one of the things that I've wanted to do with the upgrade for a while is get some perspective from some other parts of the world about some of the bullshit that goes on that we've talked about millions and millions of times. on this podcast. So I've got Louis Gino, who is from London. He's in a couple of bands, including Ironed Out and Last Words, right?
Nah, Last Orders.
Last Orders, right, yeah. Right. I was close.
That's all right. I'll take that. Close. At least it's not Last Orders, the Nazi band. There's a Nazi band called Last Orders, but we decided to just keep our name. But, yeah, we could have changed it, but we got hardcore at the end of ours, so we went with it.
Make them change it. Fuck them.
Exactly.
And you're also a host on the Everyone But Us podcast.
That's correct, yeah, with Wemmer Knuckle Dust and Steve BDF, but they're also in Ironed Out with me as well, playing bass and guitar. Well, I'm sure you know Steve anyway from years ago.
Oh, yeah. Well, I first met Steve, 2004, when he was playing with 50 Caliber, and we played some shows with them the first time we went to Europe. And he's still playing that same guitar that he had back then.
Yeah. I think he's got a few since then, but he definitely is still playing the same guitar from back then.
I was watching some videos today. I'm like, wait, he's still playing that same guitar?
Hey, yeah. When you find one that works, you just got to stick with it.
That's what I was going to say. Go what works. Do it.
That's it.
But yeah, so I wanted to bring Louis on and talk a little bit about his music background, but also he and I had a little discussion because he's a listener of the podcast, and he had asked me about some political stuff. So being that that's one of our favorite subjects, we're definitely going to get into that and scream and yell for a little bit about the recent goings on with all this impeachment bullshit. But tell me a little about how you got started in music, and then I guess how you found your way to hardcore, because it's always interesting to me to hear how people find that path in different parts of the world.
Yeah, so my story was I wasn't really massively into sort of like if we in a broad scope heavy music, so to speak, so metal, hardcore, punk, whatever. Wasn't really into music at all. Obviously, I knew about music growing up. I mean, it's hard not to be listening to music. Obviously, pop, hip hop, all different sort of types of stuff. But I got into, say, music around about the time I finished college. So that was probably 2002, 2003. I think I was just hanging out with sort of different mates at the time because I just used to play a lot of sports. So I was a massive soccer player. Obviously football over here in the UK. We don't say soccer, we say football. But yeah, so from that, I was listening to like new metal stuff really. That's how I got into the music at first. And then from there, started going to sort of like shows, club nights more than anything, just hearing different bands and stuff. But I wasn't majorly deep into it until obviously I got into the hardcore around about 2005. That's when I sort of like got my teeth into it, and then obviously I've stuck around ever since. But yeah, my journey has been from say 2005, but 2002, 2003 starting into actual music itself.
So what were you listening to early on?
Early on, obviously, I was listening to the generic stuff. Obviously, are we talking like when I got into it, or hardcore you're talking about?
Even before hardcore, because that's one of the things that interests me the most. Like everybody's got their gateway drug that kind of gets them in the door.
Yeah,
and then they find hardcore.
Obviously, the biggest gateway obviously was Limp Bizkit, Korn. Those are the bands that stood out to me because they just sounded, especially Limp Bizkit, because obviously, I mean, as corny as it is now, and obviously I know they're influential for some of the younger generation, so to speak, but they just had a different element, which obviously I was very surprised to see that there was this white dude who, I mean, he's not the best rapper in the world or the greatest rapper, but he's got a flow, he can hold it down, but obviously comparing to other rappers, he ain't that great. But yeah, Fred Durst obviously has got that charisma, so that's what got me into it. And then sort of like heavier stuff like Machine Heads was another band that I got into pretty early on. That was obviously after going to shows and hearing different bands and stuff. And then from there, obviously I never mentioned, but I was into a lot of metalcore bands as well. So your Unearths, Killswitch Engages, those are the bands that, I started getting into that stuff more and more. Like, I mean, just because it just sounded a little bit more better in that. And obviously the people who I was hanging out with at the time were more into that sort of thing as well. Because I think New metal peaked at around 2000, 2001, and then after that it just sort of like slid out from there, and then obviously other stuff started coming around, so your metalcore stuff, your emo shit and everything else. But I was just more into new metal, metalcore, and then hardcore.
So let me ask you this. Let's go even further back. So Gary and I really came up on like 80s hair metal, regular metal, etc., rock and roll, and then we transformed at around the same time, listening to like Metallica, Megadeth, etc., and then finding hardcore along the way as well. What were you listening to before you even got into listening to heavy music? What was your thing when you were young?
When I was young, I mean, it goes without saying, I know a lot of people wouldn't like to admit it, but I was, like most people of our kind of age, I was a massive fan of Michael Jackson, and even stuff like Bobby Brown. I was into my sister, having an older sister who was into sort of like, New Jack Swing, and obviously some rap and that, a lot of R&B, so that's what I used to always listen to, and I always used to hear in the radio, along with a lot of pop music as well, like, because whatever's hot at the time, you can't get away from it, whether you're going to the mall, whether you're at the doctor's or something. I mean, maybe not the doctor's, but if you could be in a lift somewhere and they're playing some tune or that you've heard on the radio or something like that. But yeah, definitely sort of like pop, R&B, that sort of type. That's what I was into. And my mum and my dad had a lot of records as well. Otis Redding, I remember I've seen that as a kid, like vinyl we're talking about. But Michael Jackson definitely was the one that stuck out. That's one of the first stars that you know of as a kid. I mean, I was born in 85. So by the time I get into like 88, 89, 90, so yeah, Michael Jackson was everywhere at the time, so it was kind of hard to escape him, innit? Like, especially once Bad came out. So yeah, that was my initial. But my big sister as well, she's probably my biggest influence. She's a little bit older than me. She's like, when was she born? 78. She's 7 years older than me. So I remember her having Appetite for Destruction on tape, Guns N' Roses. Yep. The cover for me blew my mind because it's the inlay, which is that mad shit with that red. I can't even describe what it is. But it's
the whatchamacallit painting.
Yeah, and then there's a girl. Yeah, and then there's a girl on the floor with like her top sort of like half ripped, and it was just like, it's kind of crazy. Prodigy, she was into Fat of the Lamb, sorry, that album, and also the Crazy QAnon guy at the Capitol Hill, Jamiroquai. I was into that shit as well. So yeah, she got me into that sort of stuff, man. She got me into that, but
she was into that Insurrection Insanity.
No, she definitely went there, but Insurrection Insanity, yeah, I like that.
That's cool. I never knock whatever gets people started with music. Everybody's different, and all you hardcore kids, you talk a lot of shit, but a lot of you started with Slipknot and Limp Bizkit, so don't lie. Mm-hmm. Just accept it. It's okay.
That's the thing. I've always said, like, oh man, I wish I could have got into hardcore when I was like 14, 15 years old, like a lot of people, but you can't choose what path and where your life is at the time of growing up. It's just one of those things. I'm grateful that I got into it at the end, but you do find a lot of people when they're talking about what bands they were into, like, yeah, I was into this band. I was like, no, you weren't. Stop lying. You listen to NSYNC and that with your sister, man. Don't lie. There's no shame in the game, you know what I mean? But yeah.
Right. And it's funny because we have an episode that's coming up that we already recorded, but we haven't put out yet, talking about the year 1991, and we were talking a lot about New Jack Swing.
Oh, okay, yeah. New Jack Swing was hard, man. I remember buying a CD back maybe 10, 15, probably 10 years ago. I mean, yeah, who buys CDs still? But yeah, I bought a New Jack Swing compilation, man. New Jack Swing was banging, man.
Banging.
Right, it's banging, man. Like, even just New Jack City is the film for New Jack Swing. Like, yeah.
That's exactly what we were talking about, because that came out in 91, and that was such a big moment just in music in general, because it was a convergence of a bunch of different things between like that New Jack Swing style, but also you had Ice-T on there and a lot of heavier rap stuff, which was more of my thing. I wasn't so much into the R&B side of things. I was more into the hip hop stuff and like
for real.
Ghetto Boys and NWA and stuff like that, along with listening to lots of metal. Like I started with like Kiss and Van Halen, and was into hair metal, but also thrash metal, and then found hardcore just from kids trading tapes. Suddenly it was, instead of Exodus, it was Agnostic Front and the Cro-Mags, and it was like, oh, okay, this is something.
Yeah.
And where I come from, my uncle was in Kool and the Gang, so I started out by going to shows for seeing them, and
when you were like yay high.
Yeah, I was literally 5 years old the first time I went to see them. And,
damn, that's pretty hard.
You end up seeing all kinds of like crazy shows as a kid that you can't appreciate until you're an adult, that you were in the fucking room. But I started there, but then I found my way to my own music, and in the 80s I was listening to hip hop, and I was listening to rock. Like whatever rock music was big on MTV, I was watching it. So like you said you were born in 85?
Yeah.
85, that's when I was like keyed in on what was happening on MTV. So it could be anything from like new wave, like 80s nonsense, all the way up through, Guns N' Roses and Metallica and etc. straight on through. And I never stopped listening to hip hop until like maybe 2000, 2001, because I feel like that's around the point where it just, I don't know, the way it's put together changed, and part of it, we talked about it, Gary, on the other episode about
we talked about it a few times.
Sampling, when the sampling went away.
Oh yeah,
the originality around the music. Not saying that sampling is original, but it just changed the tone of that style of music completely. I just kind of fell out with it, but in the early 90s I found punk, which led me to listening to hardcore.
Oh, okay. Sorry, just cut you off there. As you just mentioned around hip hop losing its originality, I mean, I kind of got to agree with you, man. Like, I'm not sure if you heard of the YouTube channel Up Rocks, where they just have like tons and tons of like 90s hip hop and late 80s, some early 80s as well. But
I'm pretty sure I've seen some of the stuff on there.
But some just I mean, without sounding like some purist, because I'm not like a massive hip hop fan. I know artists, I know groups and stuff, but like when they say about that golden age of hip hop being sort of like the late 80s, 90s, anything else after that just pales in comparison. I know we had some big artists like your 50 Cent, your Eminems, and obviously the groups that came about it afterwards, but I've got to agree with you, Len. It's just it did lose its way and its originality.
Now, what I'm going to say, and this is going to be mildly controversial, but the two people that you pointed out as being important, both of them are only important because of Dr. Dre, because he understands that he can't sample anymore. But if he builds his own songs with real musicians and creates his own samples that still sound organic, that's why people love it so much. Yeah. Whereas everybody else is just pushing buttons and creating something that already kind of exists.
Okay.
It's like twisting it in a way instead of actually being creative. But that's just my own personal opinion. Some people might kill me for that, but I like the Roots because the Roots are basically the same thing. They're actually musicians who also rap over top of it. And it just makes for a more interesting experience than listening to canned samples over and over again.
Yeah.
Did you guys, I mean, obviously you've got that episode coming out soon, so I don't want to delve into it too much because you still has to come out, but did you guys talk about drill and the new generation of hip hop and stuff? I say hip hop I say hip hop, but for some people drill and trap isn't hip hop. They might call it pop music.
We didn't really get into that too much.
We didn't get deep into it just because we were concentrating on the year 1991, so we talked about certain things. But I think we've talked about it a few times before, and to me, the hip hop that's around now is completely different from what I consider to be hip hop, just because growing up in New York, you know, the other side of the Bronx from where I am is what they consider to be, you know, the
one
place
of the
where
main places where
hip hop was created. Yeah, on Sedgwick Avenue on the other side of the Bronx. And it's just there were the fundamentals of hip hop.
Yeah.
Which was about graffiti and breakdancing and also rhyming. And I think it's gone so far away from the fundamentals at this point. Yeah. Even just the idea of freestyling, because Eminem's best stuff by far was him on like Tim Westwood and all this other stuff, just freestyling. They just throw words at him and he just spitting off the top of the head. And it's just crazy how he was able to do that. And you do that with some of these mumble guys now, and you could, like, I've seen the videos as well. They're so confused, they just don't know what to do.
You go, I can't spit to these old beats. Like, give them the beat, and they just.
But that was such an integral part of hip hop in the formative years, and even 10 plus years out, that now is just so completely lost. And it's a combination of that, and I was never into when they started to really mix the hooks and like the R&B type stuff.
Okay.
So that kind of lost me, and that's why I was never as big into Biggie and stuff. Because to me, I was listening, like I started off, like I said, with Ghetto Boys and NWA, and was getting into stuff like that, and then going in other directions like Tribe. And all that stuff, it was a different vibe to it. And even the stuff I didn't necessarily like as much, like I wasn't as big into De La Soul, and crazy as it is because I'm from the Bronx, I wasn't as big into KRS, but they had a different element to them. And the stuff that comes out now, for the most part, there's a few things that are out now that I do enjoy. Like I like Rum the Jewels. There's a guy named Locksmith who's really good. There's a couple other guys that are out.
Thing is, you gotta dig for it now.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're listening to hip hop on the radio or just what's popular, it's like if I went into a restaurant and I said, "Yo, let me get a Sprite," they would hand me a LaCroix and tell me that it's actually tasty. I mean, that's literally how I feel when I'm listening to this bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so. It's so different now, and I was never one to go with just the radio stuff or the MTV stuff with any kind of music. Like, it was cool to see some of the stuff that I liked pop up on MTV, but that wasn't where I was looking for new music. Like, once in a while, it might expose me to something. Like, I think I first learned about Soundgarden from seeing them on Headbangers Ball or something, but I was searching out my own music because that was before the days, you know, here comes the old man talk. Back in my day, there was no YouTube. So, you know, we had to go and actually search the shit out.
So that puts you at year 2000 for turning 15.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's your musical awakening right there.
Yeah, pretty much. It was.
Yeah, the middle was right there. Well, I think we were talking about that too recently, Len, because I think 2001 was when were we talking about this? That I saw Marilyn Manson and Slipknot. And
I think so.
Linkin Park and Papa Roach opened the show.
Was that on a Family Values tour or something?
No, they were all on Ozzfest, and on the off days from Ozzfest, they would book their own shows. So I went to Jones Beach, and I missed. The first two bands were Mudvayne and Disturbed, because I would do whatever I can to not sit through Disturbed. and then it was.
You didn't want to ooh your
No, absolutely not. I had to sit through them once in life, and that was more than enough. But yeah, it was Mudvayne, Disturbed, Linkin Park as they were starting to really blow up.
Yep.
Papa Roach as they were already like up to another level, and then Slipknot and Marilyn Manson. But that was 2001. That was when that whole nu metal bubble was really just huge.
Yeah.
I'm not a nu metal hater. I mean, we talked about this. There are really bad bands in the group, and obviously I won't listen to it. But there were a couple new metal bands that had a song or two.
Sure.
It's fine. Yeah. If you got a song or two, I'm cool with it. Like
some of the early Korn stuff was cool.
Yeah.
But I can't do System of a Down.
Oh no, absolutely not.
Can't do it.
Nope, absolutely not one song.
I'm the only one in Billy Club that's not down, and they keep trying. They're like, "Yo, you got to give it another shot." I'm like, "No,
there are no more shots available.
Can't do it."
It's funny you mentioned about Ozzfest. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day. He said something about Crazy Town used to pay to get on Ozzfest at some point.
A lot of the bands used to pay to get on Ozzfest.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Once they realized, and I know some of this from a few bands that played Ozzfest, because Sworn Enemy did Ozzfest one year, and they would always rotate, and they were telling me about, like, some days they'd be on at, like, 10 a.m.
Yeah, it was up at 10 a.m., like, damn.
Because what happened was, once Slipknot blew up off of Ozzfest, Sharon Osbourne got an idea for a whole new business model, and they had bands' labels pay to get them on Ozzfest.
Right.
So they wouldn't get paid, but they would be touring for free because they'd get the catering every day and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe they'd get a little per diem, but
they also lost money on all shirt sales. 20% off of the top.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever you sold, you had to hand 20% back to
Sharon.
Osbournes.
Yeah, but they would rotate, so some of those bands would play at like 10 or 11 in the morning, and then the next day they'd play in the afternoon in like a prime slot. But it'd just be a constant rotation, because once they realized that they could blow up bands like that the way Slipknot did, all of a sudden, and I don't know if Sworn Enemy did this, but I'll just use them as an example. Let's say, because they were signed to Elektra Records, let's say Elektra Records pays X amount of money to get them on Ozzfest. They would do that, and then if they wouldn't blow up, a lot of the time after it's a failed experiment, they would just drop the band.
Yep. And you'd still owe the money.
Yeah, you would still owe them all that money because it's all in advance. So whatever you get is in advance from the label. Eventually, you got to pay. Because I know Sworn Enemy did it. A bunch of other bands did it. They started using RVs, and they would just tour in the RV.
Yeah, save money in terms of hotel costs. Just sleep in it.
So they would take that advance money and buy an RV, and then if you get dropped by the label, then you still got to pay all that advance money back. So here you are with an RV that you haven't even fully paid off.
Right.
But that was the business model for Ozzfest after Slipknot, because Slipknot just blew up so heavy that they were like, oh, we can make money doing this. And then eventually that's why the whole Ozzfest concept kind of died.
Yeah.
Because the labels would put out all this money. A lot of these bands wouldn't blow up, because for every band that you had that was like Slipknot or like Fear Factory or something, you had all these other bands that would
knock off imitations, pretty much. Yeah.
You had all these other bands, and they weren't necessarily bad bands. It's just they thought that they were going to blow them up like Slipknot, and when they didn't, it's all, typical corporate mentality. They didn't blow up, so, oh well, we're done with them. And just toss them aside, but they still owe all that money, so they still got to stay out there touring and shit, because that's the only way to make that money and pay it back.
Don't do pay to play.
They owe whatever money for merchandise and stuff like that, because you got to do all the merchandise in advance.
So is pay to play a big thing over in England?
In terms of the hardcore scene, not so much, but there have been times where that has been used by people, especially the ones where it's like, yo, here's some tickets. If you sell X amount of tickets, then we can pay you something if you play. So you're not exactly paying to play, but you need to sell X amount of tickets, that you might get some money at the end of the show. But it used to happen in metalcore, deathcore scenes that there was a lot of pay to play. But hardcore scene, you hardly get paid anything. So for someone to say you got to pay to actually play a show, like, get the fuck out of here. We could put our own shows on. We don't need to do that. We can have people turn up on the door and pay £5, and they'll happily pay, and they'll get in. We don't need to do some silly pay to play. Half the time, whenever people do those pay to play stuff, the promoter ends up doing a runner with all the money anyway, because he's got his money, so he doesn't need to do anything else after that. But
same as over here. The whole selling tickets thing and all that stuff. A lot of bands just refuse to do that over there?
Promoters just don't try it anymore, because people are wise to it. I mean, if you're naive and you don't know any better, you're like, oh yeah, but this guy's helping us out. But if you talk to the right people and you're in with the right people and say, yeah, we're doing this, be like, yo, don't do that. We could be selling tickets for someone. That's his job or her job. They're the promoter. You guys obviously should promote the show by giving away flyers, or if you've got a show, you tell people, yo, we're going to be playing this next show that's going to be coming up. But for you to be selling tickets for the promoter, I was like, what? You're doing their job for them. Like, it's just stupid. Like,
well, at least you guys taught them a lesson over there. I wish they would do that over here. They still haven't learned.
Yeah, I think that's wild, man. Like, people still are just falling for that shit.
Oh, it happens all the time over here. And there are some bands. Listen, there are some bands that will just go and do it and just be that band. It's like they get on the big shows because they sell tickets.
And I'm thinking to myself, do you have no dignity, my man?
No.
Yeah. Because I was in Descent for a while, and when we were doing that band, it was a rule that if someone offered us a show and they wanted us to sell tickets, immediately turn it down.
Yes.
No show is worth. I said, I don't even care if Slayer asks us to sell tickets. They don't need us to sell tickets, so I'm not doing it.
Exactly. It's not your job to be. If you wanted to be selling tickets, you'd become a promoter. You do your own shows and stuff. Like, you're there as an artist, or you're there as the musician in the band coming to play and to do your thing and to let off some steam. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't need the added stress of having to be selling tickets for somebody else that's what they should be doing. I mean, yeah, it sucks promoting shows. I do promotion with shows with Ruction Records and with Ready Eye Collective. We put on Sworn Enemy, like we've done stuff like that, but we've never said to Sworn Enemy, oh, you guys need to sell. I mean, not that we would, but we've never said to any band, you guys need to sell tickets. The least we expect you to do is just put the flyer on your Instagram, or just let people know that the show's happening. That's it, bare minimum. So it's kind of crazy to hear that is still actually, obviously, not in the past year because of COVID and that, but that was happening.
Yeah, hopefully they kind of give that up after COVID, but who knows? We've talked about it a little bit. I don't know what things are going to look like post-COVID, so who really knows? I know you guys were trying to get something off this year, and then it got canceled, right?
Yeah, we announced. I mean, obviously it was a year ago. My memories has left me, but last year. I mean, I know playing those shows has just been strange, man. Like, strange. Even if you're not in a band, just going to shows has just been strange. But we had Shutdown announced to headline one of the nights, or to be one of the main supports of. We had I think it was. Was it 3 day a week? I think it was a 2-day weekend. No, I think it was 3 days. We had Friday, Saturday, Sunday in South London, and Shutdown was ready to play. Like, and a lot of my friends, I was hyped because I saw Shutdown the year previously at Santa Revolution Festival, which has now been renamed Revolution Calling. Singer from No Turning Back, My Time. That's his little venture that he does. And I saw Shutdown there, and they fucking killed it, man. So I'm pretty gutted that COVID has happened, but obviously. It is what it is, but you want people to be safe. You can't be putting on shows in places and people end up getting sick. I mean, that's another conversation about COVID, etc. But you just have to do the basic thing and just make sure that people's safety is the priority. I mean, I know there's a lot of COVID skeptics, whatever how they feel about it, but at the end of the day, people have been dying from this disease, and the last thing we want to do is to be putting on shows. I mean, we can't even put on shows. Pubs are closed. All pubs in the UK are currently closed. We're on another lockdown. So, yeah. And pubs and venues. There's nothing been going on.
So, side note, and I don't want to take us out of this conversation, but you mentioned Sound of Revolution. for about 2 years, my studio was actually named Sound of Revolution. We started out as Landmine Studios, and then I had a break with the other two owners at the time, and I left to do my own thing, and that was the name that I had come up with and chosen on my own. And I'm talking about, this is like 2006 or 7.
Oh, wow.
I was running around under that name, and then over time I made up with the other guys, and I took back the original name because they had just completely stopped doing anything studio related. So to get all my other previous releases back underneath the same
umbrella
name, I just went back to using Landmine Studios.
Oh, okay.
Approximately, I guess it was like 2009. So I've been that since then. But there was a short time where I was actually parading around as the Sound of Revolution.
Sound of Revolution as well. Okay, that's a bit of history with the name as well. I know that was a Warzone album as well, but yeah.
And that was the impetus was actually that record.
Oh, sick! Yeah, it's a big record, man.
That was a good record.
You guys are under lockdown currently.
Correct. Yeah.
How bad is it there? Because we don't have good intel in the U.S. on what anybody is doing outside of the U.S., but we know that we have failed pretty miserably at COVID containment, COVID deaths, COVID infections, etc. How bad is it over there?
Well, we had a crazy guy with crazy hair who was out of his mind, and they don't have anything like that over there, right?
I mean, we got a guy with crazy hair. I mean, probably not as crazy as your previous guy who was very crazy, but just to bring it back. So obviously COVID, what are we, 2021? So obviously last year March we went into our first lockdown, which lasted for about, I want to say, 3 months. We went into it in March, mid-March, and came out of it around June. Yeah, I want to say May, June, but probably June. Pubs didn't reopen until the 4th of July, yeah, because I remember it was, oh shit, American independence. That's, it's funny in that we're reopening the pubs on the day of American independence. But in terms of how it was handled well at first. Well, not particularly well, because we should have obviously closed borders, we should have shut stuff down. They done gigs were still happening, like massive shows. They even had like a horse racing event where there was like up to 40,000 people at this event. Wow. Yeah, but they didn't want to close it down because it's all starting to come out now like that. They should have acted a lot more quicker. I mean, I'm just going off of what I remember. So if some of it is factually wrong, if someone was to listen to this and check it afterwards, then obviously they can check for themselves to get the right information. But yeah, it's been pretty similar to America. Apparently, as of right now, we've got for population, we're doing pretty bad in terms of people dying, like really bad. We're like up there in sort of like the top of the leagues, so to speak. Obviously, America is still up there in terms of the amount of people who are dying from the virus. But per capita, I think population size, we're doing pretty bad at the moment. We're actually doing well with the vaccine rollout. 15 million people have already been vaccinated in this country. So from the groups that are obviously susceptible to catching the virus, so your older people, pensioners, or your seniors as you call it over there, people with underlying health conditions, healthcare workers as well, but not everyone gets it. I don't think our police have got it, our fire service hasn't got it, our teachers don't have it as yet, but medical personnel, and they definitely will start getting the vaccine. There's a lot of COVID, a lot of black people, a lot of Asian people. When I say Asian, I mean South Asian, so Indian, Pakistani. There's a lot of people who are they don't want to take the vaccine. They think there's like a conspiracy that it's going to like wipe us out, or because obviously there's been a history, especially in America, there's history of vaccinations against especially African Americans,
right? In
terms of like doing experiments, and then obviously there's a history of British governments experimenting on people in places far away lands, doing nuclear tests and shit on them, like to see how people will be susceptible to a certain disease or pathogen if it was exposed to them. So we got that as well. But besides that, yeah, we're doing all right.
No problem to be seen.
No problem. But yeah, we're back. We've been back underneath another lockdown since December. It is starting to grate a little bit. I mean, I wish I was back at work, but I mean, I can't complain too much. I'm under furlough, so unfortunately, I've been hearing a lot about it with you guys. When you haven't even really had lockdowns. You've just obviously everything is dependent on your state, but there's been no work for a lot of people, especially for our people who work in the touring industry and hospitality and stuff. Like everything's shut down, and you guys don't get furlough. I mean, we've been lucky that. So, for example, I lost my job. No, I never lost my job. My job got put on on hold. So the government paid 80% of my wages. And then the company paid 20% of our wages. Now it's currently at the government pays 60% of the wages, and my company takes up the other 20%. So I'm losing 20% of my wage, but I don't have to go to work. I'm still got my money in that. But I want to go back to work. I don't want to be sitting indoors in the house before anyone thinks that I'm a bum or thinks that Brits don't want to work, they just want to sit in their arse and get government money. No, that's not what we want. People want to go back to work. But currently, if we go and sit on the subway, on the tube, and there's people breathing in all sorts of different shit, how's that good for the economy and how's that good for people? People are going to get sick. But obviously there's this toss-up between health and wealth. And obviously we've got a conservative government who are paying their citizens to stay at home. So you heard that right, a conservative government, not some communist fucking boogeyman stories that people always want to talk about. Oh, only fucking communists and liberals, they only want to pay
socialism.
So yeah, we got a conservative government who are paying for people to stay at home until they believe that it's a correct time, and then everything will reopen back up. And at this point, nothing's been announced as yet, but maybe April we might start seeing things reopen, maybe earlier, but April I can definitely see things start to reopen again. Schools are currently closed at the moment, so a lot of kids are working from home, doing their schoolwork from home. The only kids who do get to go to school are the ones of key workers. So if they work in health, if your parents are in the NHS, our National Health Service, right, or if they're police, fire, or even if they're teachers as well, at least they got a chance to go to school, because obviously you can't have your kid who's 7 or 8 years old staying at home by themselves, home teaching themselves. You know they're not going to do that, just going to get a bowl of cereal and watch fucking TV, because that's what I'd be doing if I had a chance during 2021 lockdown. And fucking I was at school, I'll just be eating cereal and just be fucking just watching cartoons straight up.
Listen, I'm 47 and I'm working from home, and that's what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Wait, exactly. I can stay at home and play video games?
Yeah. Oh man, it's been hard. It's been hard, but there's a lot of people who are definitely struggling at, especially with the whole mental health in it. I mean, it affects everyone differently. I've been all right. I mean, yeah, there are days where it's like, oh shit, man, it's really boring. I need to just stop eating and just drinking shit, and so I've been exercising a little bit more. I've just go on walks with my girlfriend and our dog and stuff. I mean, my girlfriend, she's here, she works from home, so she's still here, she's doing her thing. But I'm back to work on Monday just for one day, but then after that I'm back on furlough. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I've been working from home since March 9th of last year. We were at work on the 8th, and they're like, hey, this shit's getting wild. Start working from home. We figure in 2 weeks we'll have you back in the office. Well, 2 weeks turned into a year, and they're telling us we're not going to be back in the office till at least maybe July. And that's still a maybe, and it'll be optional at best. So if I don't want to go back, I don't have to go back.
Yep.
So it's just like, I look at this as, imagine if this had happened 20 years ago or 15 years ago, before we all had high-speed internet our houses.
This
This would be a no-go situation.
Yeah. it would have been on levels of 1918 during the Spanish flu and stuff like that. It probably would have been worse, because obviously would have been a more developed state at the time. So yeah, it would have been much more worse.
Yeah, because I started working from home in March, and then they opened my office again right before Thanksgiving, and we were open for, I don't even think, 2 weeks, and then they closed everything again.
Yeah.
And then I've been working from home ever since. And listen, I'm glad I still have a job, but it's a little crazy. I'm getting a little stir crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
You know,
I bet.
And now it's so cold outside, and we've been getting snow like every week. So even taking a walk is kind of an adventure.
Yeah, I saw that last week. My friend, my friend, I was actually saying to my sister today when I spoke to them. Known him since '96. He's just recently moved to New Jersey, so he's in your state now.
Oh no.
Yeah, he lives in Lodi.
Okay, North Jersey, but. Yeah, it still counts.
Still, yeah. Well, I heard it's famous because that's where the Misfits are from, isn't it?
Yeah, that's their home base.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where my mate's staying. But yeah, I saw the snow pictures the other day. It was pretty wild. But yeah, man, it's just I knew COVID was gonna be harder. I don't want to say harder for you guys, but obviously, with the healthcare thing, with what you guys have to, I mean, if you've got a good job, then healthcare it's kind of easier. But if you don't have a job with good benefits, or you have no benefits at all, then imagine catching COVID and then you have to pay for your medicine and all that shit, like, or the ventilator and then the hospital bill when you come out. Like, it's just sad, man, when I read some of the stories and that, and obviously people can't keep up with paying their rent, paying their bills and shit, and it's just sad.
I'm glad you outlined it before as far as how it's working with you being furloughed and the way the money is working for you, because that's something that is not happening here at all.
No.
There's so many people on unemployment, and for a long time the unemployment systems, because the unemployment systems in different states are all different, and some of them were running on these old ass computers, because there were stories as the unemployment started to pick up. There were stories about how some of these states, I think Connecticut was one of them, that their whole unemployment system is on some old computer system.
Like 1980s old.
Yeah, like Commodore 64 shit or something. And it was just insanity. And all of their systems were getting completely overwhelmed. And that was just for basic unemployment. What you're talking about is far more than what people are getting here. Here, they're getting laid off, they're getting a kick in the ass, and that's pretty much it. There's so many people struggling. You know, they've made it so that people can't get evicted, but that doesn't really change anything, because no matter what you're doing, whether it's a business or even just paying your rent, okay, they can't evict you, but that rent just keeps piling up, and now we're looking at a year. If you're trying to run a restaurant or something and you can't cover your rent, like,
you close.
Yeah, you're just carrying a stack that's just bigger and bigger, and it's going to break your back. Yeah, there's just nothing you can do.
At some point, the implosion is going to happen. Whether it's now, whether it's 6 months from now or 2 years from now, that money, somebody is going to come try and collect it. And when they come try and collect it, and you don't got it, assed out. That's going to be you.
That's it.
Your business. That's going to be your housing situation, and the government has done shit to fix it.
It's a ticking time bomb. Because we've been talking about it since we started this podcast back in June, and we originally predicted that the apocalypse would come at the end of the summer and then at the end of the year, and it just keeps getting pushed back, that rent apocalypse, because a lot of these people, once they look at their numbers, if they're running a business, they're not going to be able to cover even
the basics, the
basics. And if you're talking about rents, these people are just getting crushed more and more. And eventually, once they finally lift that eviction thing, people are going to be out on the streets in massive amounts because so many people are losing jobs left and right.
When is that? The rent. There's a term for it, isn't there? They put a hold on the rents. When is that coming into effect? Like in terms of when does it expire? Is there a date?
Well, they keep pushing it.
They keep pushing it, but it's not even a hold on rents. All it is just that they can't be evicted.
Okay.
So as every month goes by, it's another, $1,500 or whatever your rent is.
Yeah, that's the anxiety for that.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're 10 months in, you're in the hole for tens of thousands of dollars at this point. And yeah, okay, you can't get evicted, but what's going to happen when they lift that? They're going to come right at you and toss you out, whether you're a business or whether you're just, a family and that's your home rent situation.
Yeah, we still find it mad that how many stimulus checks have you guys had?
Oh, two.
Two. And there were...
and they've been dismal, and they're still fighting about the third one.
And I didn't actually get stimulated with any money because there's a cap on how much you can
earn,
to get stimulated. So my stimmies were non-existent, and I'm looking at this new one, and I can't get that one either. So I'm like, sure, I have had a job the whole time, and my secondary business has been fine. And in fact, I would say it's been better than fine.
Yeah.
I don't need the money, and I'm not going to go running around crying about it. But if they're handing out free money, I would love to have some.
Yeah, of course.
They're like, hook me up.
The corporations are taking it. The big people are taking the stimulus check money, like.
Well, yeah, exactly.
They get written. I've read into it and watched it. They get written into these massive packages. I don't know why they come first before ordinary American citizens. Like, no matter what your side of the political spectrum you're on, because people need help. You could be diehard Republican or diehard Democrat, but being diehard isn't going to pay your fucking bills, and people need fucking help. So all they're going to be offering is 2 measly stimulus checks. Like, as I said, like, I get paid every month furlough money, like my wage. So if for example, I'm going to talk in British sterling pounds. If I get paid £1,500, I might get 1,350. I'll lose 150. That's it. It's losing £150 is a lot of money, but I'm still getting paid. I can still pay my bills. I can still pay my rent. Yes, we might get a tax increase that comes up. Who knows? It probably will happen. But you guys got 2 stimulus checks that it's peanuts. I'm sorry to say, but you just got peanut fucking money. And I thought your Republicans were going to fucking help people, but then I'm naive, I guess.
Well,
they're actually more against helping us than the Democrats.
I mean, neither one of them really wants to help, but the Republicans are putting up more. The Republicans are more worried about people making a certain amount getting stimulus checks, and that's why the whole thing was held up. It's like you're so worried about that you're going to make sure nobody gets it. But as you probably know, as somebody that follows politics here, socialism here is fine as long as it's for big corporations.
Yes,
when
correct.
Socialism that gives to the little people, then it's a problem.
Happens here as well.
But if we're helping the big corporations, then it's totally fine.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes. That's the way it's been, and that's the way it continues to be. And it doesn't matter who's president or what political party is in charge, because so many of them are just so corrupt and in the pockets of big corporations that they're not interested in helping the little people.
See, now, what I gotta say is they are cutting their nose off to spite their faces, in my opinion. Now, if you think about this, if you give the money to the corporations, you just handed them the money. And then the little guys can't give them money. Now, if we had just given the little guys the money, we'd have the money to go out and buy the shit from the corporations.
Exactly.
And they would still get the fucking money.
Stimulate the economy.
Right.
But they don't see that. No. They think if you give poor, working class, middle class people money, they're gonna go spend it on stuff that they don't need. They're going to spend it on drugs and food. Well, that's the system we live in. Like, we're not going to hoard the wealth like what fucking people with loads of money do. Like, because that's what we always say. You guys said it as well in the last episode that I listened to, or two or three ago. Trickle down fucking economics, like, it doesn't fucking work. Like, it just doesn't work. I mean, I'm not an economist, but we've seen the shit in your country from Reagan, and in my country from Thatcher. They pushed all this market economic shit, like, and it hasn't worked. It's made the people at the top rich, but then the people at the bottom, who are the ones who get all the unemployment shit, have a job, then get made redundant. But then when you hear about the redundancy packages that people get, it's next to nothing. But then when you hear about what the people at the top of the company get with their golden handshakes and their payoff money, it goes into, so it's always going to be rigged against the ordinary person, which it sucks. It really does, man. It's not fair, but it takes people to actually want to change the system. I'm not saying that people have to go into a communist system or anything like that, but you need to just, at some point, people need to start thinking, like, well, who are we voting for and why are we voting for this? Because they obviously don't give a shit about your interests. Like, maybe if people do say it's right that politicians are not there to give a shit about your interests.
I mean, they barely even give a shit about themselves. So their lives were threatened, and then this impeachment thing happened, and then they were like, "Oh no, he's not guilty." Like, you people could have fucking died, but they're more concerned about votes and making their corporate donors happy instead of, like, their own lives, which is, it's insane.
Yeah, it just shows though that the Republicans. I mean, Donald Trump has the Republican Party on lock. Like, he's got that party on lock. He ain't even the president anymore, but he still has a grip on that party.
They're scared to death of him.
Frightened, mate. Frightened.
I don't understand why they're still scared of him now. He's technically gone. So what is the fear now?
Well, you know what bugs me out the most? And tell me what you guys think about this. What drives me crazy with the impeachment thing is that I would think they would want to be rid of him, and that was their chance to be rid of him.
Permanently, forever.
Like because all he's going to do is, in 4 years, he's going to fuck up their whole shit, because I'm sure they have their own people that they want to put in, and he's just going to overshadow that whole thing. But they had the chance to push him out the door, and they didn't touch it. And I just don't get it. It's insane to me.
I don't even know.
It's mad. Like, for me, like, I think you guys mentioned it as well, but, like, Ted Cruz is such a bitch. Such a bitch. Like, legit.
Did you see his hair?
Nah, I've seen he's all stubbled out. He's got like a goatee and shit these days.
He's got some crazy new haircut where it's like shaved on the sides, but it almost looks like a mullet.
Yeah, he's just going full, like, see what none of these fucking Republican senators and people in the House and that, they all wish they were like Donald Trump. I mean, like Trump or hate Trump, whatever. Yeah, Donald Trump, like, he was an enigma when he came in, like, back in 2016. No one thought he was going to win. I don't care who you are. Yeah, no one thought he was going to win, but he came in and he shook things up. So, but now you're going to get a lot of Republican politicians who are going to try and act like they're Trump and feel like they're Trump, and it just doesn't cut, because no one can be him. Like, Donald Trump is just a brash. He just says what he wants. He's obviously, if it's not in terms of like a teleprompter or something, he just speaks his mind and says what he wants. Whereas a lot of these other politicians, they think that they can say and speak what they want, but they're upholding to their donors and to their lobby groups and stuff like. But I don't know, I'm going off a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, as I said earlier, yeah, he's a bitch, man, Ted Cruz. Like, the guy cussed Donald Trump, fucking insulted your wife, and you're still fighting for this dude. Imagine that. Imagine getting home to your wife, someone fucking said something about your wife, and you're still fighting for this dude, man. Still fighting hard for him. It's embarrassing, man. It's embarrassing. When they use that word cuck, that is what you call
I don't even like using that word, and that's the only word that describes it. And I'm showing you guys the picture of his.
Oh, what the fuck is that?
Somebody said it's I think it was the Young Turks that said it's senator in the front, insurrectionist in the back.
What is that, man? The fade is so whack. The fade is terrible. It's not even.
Did they start to cut his hair and then they rushed the Capitol and then they never finished it and he just left it? I don't know.
He's having like a second midlife crisis or something. Like that's what it looks like to me. He's on his second one. Shit.
Oh, it's easy to have a midlife crisis when you're probably sleeping on the couch.
Oh man, yeah, it's embarrassing. But yeah, that insurrection shit, we obviously we're seeing it here from the UK. I mean, obviously it's been and gone, and obviously now the trial has of course been and gone. But like, it's pretty mad to see, man. Like that's, you know what a lot of people are saying. That's the sort of shit that US imperialists love to see when it's happening in a country that they hate. Mm-hmm. So let's say that shit was happening in Venezuela, they'll be like, yeah, this is happened. Like they'll cheer that shit on. But when it's happening in the home of democracy, obviously America obviously is the beacon of democracy around the world, when it happens so close to home and everyone's like, oh, this could never happen over here. Like, it fucking did. It did happen.
So did you see that a Republican senator from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, over the weekend said that the armed insurrection wasn't armed technically, and he doesn't see it that way, and that's how some of these senators voted against their own interests, against their own lives,
because they didn't have guns.
Well,
you can be armed with a fire extinguisher,
a club, yeah,
or a flag.
Dude, a well-trained person could be armed with their hands.
Exactly, but
they
weren't armed.
They were talking about rising up and overthrowing the Capitol. Like maybe not all of them maybe not all of the people who were there went into the building, but they all knew what they were trying to go to do. They wanted to go. I mean, they had a fucking. I mean, yes, it's everything is optics, but they had like a fucking noose and shit. Like, I mean, who's the noose for? If Mike Pence had come out, I mean, no one. I'm no Mike Pence fan, but what if Mike Pence had come out to try and calm shit down? Do you think they would have been like, oh yeah, okay, Mike Pence has told us to calm down, let's calm down? They would have gone for him. Not to say Mike Pence would have gone out there to do it, but imagine he was like, yo, let me try and calm this shit. They would have tried. There would have been one dude who would have been trying to go for him, like 100%.
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't like Mike Pence, but if Mike Pence had come out and started throwing hands, I would have a new respect for the man.
That's true. and first of all, they were chanting "Hang Mike Pence." Second of all, if you watch the video that they showed as part of the trial, he made it out of there with very little time to spare. Like they rushed him, and his family was there. They rushed him and his family downstairs. Like some of those senators.
He's the vice president. Like he's second. If Trump dies or something happens to him, he's the next guy in. Like so, it's not just some regular schmegular fucking government official. It was the vice president of the United States of America, and people are saying that he should fucking hang. And the fact is, as well, there's reports that Donald Trump didn't even hit him up to see how he was or if he's okay.
I'm not.
They were on the outs at that point.
Yeah,
because he had already singled out Pence at that point on Twitter. But to me, one of the funniest things, and this made me laugh so hard because it was breaking news as this impeachment trial was going. Did you hear about the whole conversation between Trump and McCarthy?
No.
McCarthy is there. They're banging on the door. He calls Trump, and he's like, you got to call these people off. And Trump's like, oh, well, I guess there's some people that were more upset about the election than you were. And then McCarthy turns around, and this is from multiple sources. McCarthy turns around and says to him on the phone, who the fuck do you think you're talking to?
Oh, man.
Damn.
And that was why on the last day of the impeachment trial, they decided they were going to call witnesses, and then they decided not to because they pussied out. They were going to call witnesses because they had gotten word. The word came out the night before about that phone call. Somebody leaked it. But like he actually said to the president of the United States, "Who the fuck do you think you're talking to?"
No one really,
yeah. And then he voted to acquit.
Oh man, that's mad, man.
One of the problems is that it's not just the government in Washington D.C. that's a problem, but it's across the board. So, the North Carolina Republican Party voted to censure Senator Richard Burr for voting against Donald Trump because he is also a Republican.
Yeah.
And it's just like with the police, when you try to whistle blow on someone inside, they come down on you.
Yep.
So it doesn't make it, there's no place for people to speak out against things because then you're running the fear of being shut down or shut out.
Yeah. Well, I'd also like to point out, just for a good laugh, that those were the same Republicans that didn't want to do the impeachment thing because they wanted unity. Meanwhile, now they're singling out their own people. So what the fuck ever when it comes to unity.
I don't understand how a party that talks about law and order has more or less excused the insurrection, the uprising, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's people arguing saying again it was an uprising, but people broke into the Capitol building with fucking. Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, they flew a Confederate flag inside that building, which did not happen during the Civil War.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, like you think of it that way, it's like holy shit.
That's the first time that place has been breached since the War of 1812 with the Brits. Do you know how many fucking that's 2 centuries ago? Like that shit happened.
And meanwhile, look at the people that busted in there.
Yeah.
Fucking Jamiroquai guy.
Zip-tie guy.
Like, look at these clowns that got like they weren't even like.
Donald Trump called them low class.
They were just schmucks. Like you got these clowns just rolling in, like because I love it. I talked about it on the podcast before. Like they come in and they're staying in the velvet ropes. Like most of them are just walking in the velvet ropes like a bunch of fucking tourists. It's like this is the worst insurrection I've ever seen.
Let's be serious. As guys who have been going to hardcore shows for many years at this point, had it been us breaking in there, everything would have got turned over.
Everything would have got turned over. Everything would have got turned over.
Yeah.
Everything would have got smashed off the walls. Like everything would have got turned over.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been to shows that have been more turned out than that, and I'm including like the piss and shit on the walls.
Yeah.
A few days after the this is something I want to talk about and obviously get your guys' perspective, but obviously a few days after the incident happened and stuff, I've been following a lot of, I don't follow them, but it's almost like voyeurism. Like I always just check from far just to see what these people are doing. But you got all your conservative commentators, especially the black ones, they intrigue me so much. Like, so where can I?
Nope. You can't listen to them motherfuckers. I not listen to them motherfuckers at all.
I listen to it in the sense of like I just want to hear what they have to say and how they talk, because I always know when I go to the comment section, it's just going to be people who just like, you look at their profile pictures of people and you're like, oh yeah, you're definitely that guy, but because this black person's saying it, it's your get out clause to be like, oh, I'm not a racist. This person has said it. Like, oh god. But your Candice Owens, she's probably the worst of the worst, man. Oh. She's the worst. Like her, that Officer Tatum. Do you know? Have you heard that?
Oh God, You're just killing me with these names, bro.
Who else is terrible? The Hodge twins.
The Hodge twins.
The Hodge twins.
If if I see somebody post that shit, I immediately know that I don't need to talk to them anymore. And if they can just, we're good now. I'm good.
It's true. It's true. And who is there's Terrence K. Williams. I think he's a comedian. Have you heard of that dude before?
No.
I wouldn't recommend it, but these I mean, people are entitled to their opinions, their views, and everything. But sometimes when I see the things that they write and what they post, especially when it was like MLK Day, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Martin Luther King, he would never stand for this," like the Democrats, and they use Malcolm X quotes and shit as well. I'm like, bruv, you would hate Malcolm X and Martin Luther King if they were still alive today. You would hate them. How can you pretend that they would be for what you are saying now? Because you use the context of what they said back then in terms of what your agenda is now. So obviously, famously, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X both spoke about the white liberal. But obviously, Martin Luther King was a person who wanted justice for everyone, not just black people. He wanted justice for everyone, and he was a strong critic of the Vietnam War as well, because his daughter said it. She goes, "Please stop using my father's name for your agenda or your talking points, because you would have hated my father." Like, because his approval rating at the time he died was like 8%. That's fucking pretty low, isn't it? Like, that's really low.
And let's be serious. Both the motherfuckers got killed.
Yes.
For being the people that they are.
Exactly.
Let's not pretend that, because this wasn't that long ago.
No.
This was the late 60s, early 70s. I mean, I was born in 76. Muttley was born in 74. And, I mean, like...
73.
73. So we're talking... This is right around our time frame of life. Of just plain life. My sister is... considerably older than me. She was a full-on teenager when these things happened, and we talk about it like it's so long ago. It's within range of my lifetime.
Yeah,
that these things happen, and you think that people's families didn't pass that hate along? Like, what are we talking about right now? You're fucking lying to yourself if you think that just because you're woke enough right now to understand that it was wrong, that if you were there then, that you wouldn't have been going right along with it. You'd be right in that fucking crowd, hating right along with them.
100%. That's why it's sad to see a lot of these black, Hispanic, conservative commentators. Again, they're free to have their views. Obviously, I know you've got the First Amendment right, etc. But
it's
when they're saying,
bro.
Yeah,
capitalism, they're just trying to make
money.
money.
To make money. That's definitely all it is, man. They're just trying to make money, and it's sad.
I just made the mistake of looking up Terrence K. Williams.
Yo, don't do it.
I won't do that again.
But what I'm saying is, they make money off white people who
being outraged.
Who are already outraged against the black person, who then can see a black person say the same thing that they're already thinking, and then they get their money. So I understand the long play of it, but please at least give me a wink and a nod, like I know you're fucking kidding right now, because otherwise it just makes me hate you, like, full on. I mean, if you're just trying to make money, I can't knock a hustle. I can never knock a hustle. But if this ain't a hustle, then you need to go.
Yeah, they always quote the economist Thomas Sowell as well. I'm not sure if you heard of that guy before. He's a black economist. Mm-hmm. He formerly used to be a Marxist long ago, and then he saw the light and shit. And he's one of those people who said that because of welfare being introduced in the 60s, that's how we've seen the black family become as they are now, and that's why black people can't, in America especially, can't find a way forward, and It's just a lot of the weird sort of like dog whistle talking points that people use. And there's that other guy, Larry Elder, as well. I'm not sure if you guys know, there's a documentary on Amazon called Uncle Tom. Are you guys aware of that?
I haven't watched it.
I've seen it. I haven't watched it.
You haven't watched it? Yeah, I'm just gearing myself up to watch it. Like, But I've not watched it yet, but I know I've seen reviews for it, and all the reviews that I've seen is just one-sided, biased, Republican talking points. Just like there's no, they don't back up any of their claims with actual facts. It's just my feeling. My feeling is this.
Well, you don't need facts anymore.
It's funny because conservatives always say facts don't care about your feelings until you do something, and then their feelings get all fucking hurt. They are the original cancel culture. Yeah, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were cancelled. They're the original ones who got done by the cancel culture mob because they didn't want their views to be fucking heard. But yeah.
No, well that's the trick, because all of these things that are happening in recent times were all the type of shit that all the Republicans used to talk shit about, and now it's like, oh, fuck your feelings. Oh, when we lost, it's a fix. Stop the steal. When, like, stop, just stop.
Yeah, there's those clips, which is jokes. Is like some people chanting, count the votes, and some other place, some other state, there's other people saying stop the count. Yeah, so stop the count and what was it? Stop the count and count the votes. Yeah, so count the votes and stop the count. So which is it? Which one? Which one is it? Like,
no, it's a mess. But I I laughed before, and it's not funny, but I have to laugh because otherwise I'm just gonna go mad. Where these people compare, when you were talking about Martin Luther King, these people compare George Floyd and the people that died at the Capitol, like the girl that died at the Capitol.
Oh my God!
It's like they're so completely on opposite ends of the spectrum, and yet these people try to draw parallels to it, and it's like no, just no.
These motherfuckers started this shit, man. Look at that Charlottesville fucking shit. Unite the Right March. People went there to counter the protests, and so funny story. I was in Ghana at the time. When was that? 2016. Yeah, was it 2016? When was it? Unite the Right. 2017. It was, wasn't it? Yeah,
it was
2017. So sadly, my father had passed away in 2017. So I went back to Ghana. That's where my family's originally from, in Ghana, West Africa.
Yeah, that was August 2017.
Yeah. So I went for my dad's funeral, and I mean, internet you can get it obviously in Ghana. You can get internet all over the world, but obviously it's sketchy in places. So I was gone for a few days. I was in the village, obviously my dad's village, doing the funeral stuff. Then we come back. So I've not seen any politics or watched anything for like a few days. So I've got back, managed to find internet, put on YouTube. I think I was watching Young Turks or something, or some other stuff as well. And I'm seeing there's this big riot in Charlottesville. I'm thinking, what the fuck's going on here? Like, and then I'm seeing all the footage of like, there was the black dude who got beat up in the fucking underground garage, like really fucking bad. He got beat. But then when I saw the car plow through the crowd of people, I was like, what the fuck is... I mean, I've been off the internet for 6 days. And in that 6 days, I've come back and it looks like America's about to fucking blow up into some like massive, like big ass fucking war. But then when you see the crowds of those dudes saying Jews will not replace us and shit like that, and you're just thinking, what the fuck is going on, man? Like, this is insane. It feels like a 1950s fucking reboot of some like weird fucking like TV show or something. But yeah, that and the car going through the crowd, and then of course Donald Trump just
He literally just shrugged it off.
Any big leader of any country, if he was a serious or she was a serious person, would be trying to come and bring people together and to be denouncing violence. Right. But instead, he went the other way. And that just emboldened the people even more. Like, so people could talk about the George Floyd protests and all this shit, but this shit has been brewing for fucking, not even Charlottesville, it's been brewing for fucking decades and decades, decades and decades. And it's only going to get much worse.
That we were having a conversation last week with Doc from God Forbid and Bad Wolves, and that was my point, is that you can't just look at what happened for, let's say, the George Floyd protests or any of the other protests as a singular anomaly. It's 50 years since the
Civil Voting Rights Act.
Since civil rights, since Martin Luther King was killed, etc. It's not exactly 50 years, but it's 50 years.
Yeah.
It's been 50, 60 years.
Well,
since all this stuff
because if you think about it, like, long before Martin Luther King died, there was already a lot of shit going on, and that's why he was doing what he was doing. So once they signed the Civil Rights Act, everything started to subside in the idea of a civil movement for the rights to get better, and everything just kind of relaxed over the course of time. But then that also causes all the other stuff to continue to build up, and people will speak out about it, but it's never been organized in the way that it's organized currently. Yeah. So, you can't look at it as one singular event caused one thing. It's all the events that led up to it. It's the straw that broke the camel's back.
Correct.
Not just that one thing.
Yeah.
Which is funny to think about, too, because as we talked about before, you've got that running on one track for 50 years or so, and on another track, the financial stuff that we always talk about, that's been running on another track for over 30, 40 years at this point. So it's like you got both of these things running on parallel tracks, both towards a wall.
Absolute fucking disaster.
Yeah. So all of these things that are going on now, it's not like these are sudden new problems. These are things that we're building up for our entire lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been building up
before. In the case of the racial issues, that stuff was going on before any of us were even born. And with the financial stuff, certain elements were already in place before we were born, and then it really started to pick up, like we were talking about with the Reagan years and the changes that he brought.
Yeah. If you look at the sorry to cut you off.
No, you go, mate.
If you look at the the wealth levels in the 50s and the 60s, when you're thinking about it as a term of like CEOs, CFOs, presidents, etc. of companies versus employees, it's like this.
Yeah.
If you look at it now, it's like
that.
It's not even a fucking chart.
Yeah.
Because of all the changes that happened over the course of the last 45 years.
Correct. That's that deregulation that everyone talks about from the 80s onwards.
Yep.
The same shit happened in here in the UK. We had two leaders, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, and they both followed neoliberal policies. The market takes over everything. The market will decide what you do, and it's been good for some people, and it's been okay for others. But for a vast majority of people, it's been terrible. Because if you're gonna have a factory jobs in your town, I mean, you guys, you're from New Jersey, New York. I mean, I'm here in East London. We used to always have factories and shit there. Now all our factories are now turned into fucking flash boutiques and fucking in hipster fucking joints. I mean, it's good. It brings fucking jobs and shit and that, like, but you just see the amount of people who used to come out of these factories and used to earn an honest living, an honest wage. Like, say, no one was asking for fucking communism and shit. Like, people just wanted a decent fucking wage so they can be able to save up some money, so they can buy their own home, or they can go on holiday, or they can put their kids through university or college, whatever they want to do. And that's all been pulled underneath the rug from them. And then what are you left with? Just easy to blame other people. Oh, it's the immigrants who are coming over from Mexico, or in our case, oh, it's the immigrants who are coming over from all these countries, coming to steal our women, coming to take our jobs and shit. And it's like, bro, like you're fucking, if the factory in your town has not employed anyone for fucking nearly 30 years, like all you guys do now is just fucking smoke fucking heroin and fucking take government fucking paychecks. Like, I'm not saying I'm not cussing people for that, but that's what people have got now. Like, they don't have anything because they don't feel like they've got anything else. Like, so the two go hand in hand, like in terms of like the social shit and the financial shit, man. It's just incredible how it's sad to talk about, man. It really is sad to talk about.
I talked about this in an early episode with Gary. I'm not sure if it even hit the airwaves or not, but my town used to have 4 big factories in it. and in 1992, 3 of them closed, and the 4th one closed in 1995.
Yes.
So all the big roads in my town lead directly to where those factories used to exist.
Okay.
Now, the buildings aren't even there really anymore. There's only one building left of all the big factories. And actually, no, there's 2 buildings. One, the factory still exists, but they only employ about 1/10 the amount of people they used to employ.
Yeah.
So it's like we lost a GM factory, a naval propulsion, our Homosoap factory, which makes specialty wallboard, like I don't know what you guys call it over there, but it's like sheetrock. Maybe they call it sheetrock over there. But they made that, and then there was one other factory that was an ironwork factory.
Yeah.
Everybody's gone except for the Homosoap company, which is the one that makes the wallboards. And as I said, they only employ about 10% of the people that they used to employ. So we lost, I think, as a town, over 10,000 jobs in the course of 3 years. So everything here is dead in comparison to what it was when I was growing up. When I was a kid, I could get anything I wanted at any time because all the businesses were thriving because everybody had money and everybody had a job and, there were people around. The place I rent for my studio used to be the Poppin' shopping center for my town. Gary's been there once. He'll tell you, it looks like 1983 threw up because they never updated it because there's no money to update it. So I get great rent. I can't complain, but that also comes with subpar landlordery.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the stuff you're left to fend for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, make it work. And it just comes down to we haven't as an entire country, but it would also be even your country or most of the world haven't fostered a place where small industry like that can survive.
No.
It just ship the jobs somewhere else because they can get it done cheaper and we'll make more money in our pockets.
Exactly, and the politicians who push those policies through, and the companies who obviously give them their kickbacks and stuff because we can do this shit cheaper in South Asia or in Mexico, Central America, and then they got the gal to fucking come out and go, but we always buy American. It's like, what do you mean buy American? You ain't got jobs here for Americans, or you don't have jobs here for Brits. Everything's has been sent away to faraway lands because you don't want to pay union benefits. Right. You can go. You can pay someone $10 an hour, or you can pay some kid fucking 30 cents a week. Mm-hmm. What are you gonna do? You're gonna go with that option. It's not the right option, but for these people, their bottom line is all that. It's all that matters. But so there's going to be no regeneration at all where you are, Len. There's nothing happening. It's just.
I mean, one of the spots they're turning it into like a shopping center and houses. So it's one of those like town centers where you got condos on top of buildings that have like
nothing,
restaurants or the Gap or
probably be a Walmart.
Yeah,
it's going to be a little bit of everything, and they're talking about putting in a train station because the train line that would be there could technically take you to New York City or to Philadelphia, but again, that means that you're just trying to build it so that people will come move there and just spend their money and leave, not actually be part of the town.
Right. See, that's one thing I always found weird because obviously I've been to New York, I've been to New Jersey a couple of times, but not so much. I don't really know the place too well. But obviously, New York, you can get to places in New York fairly easily by the subway, and then obviously you got the Long Island Railroad, and then obviously you can get to New Jersey and shit, the transit. But when I was in Philadelphia, like train-wise, I was like, fuck. We wanted to go, me and Ammo, I'm sure you know Ammo. We wanted to go to 1 year, the first year, went to East Coast Tsunami in Reading. We wanted to get a train there. There's no direct train.
Nope.
Bro, that's how naive we were as people from the UK, because you can get a train to anywhere in the UK pretty much, like more or less, like 90% chance if you might have to go somewhere, stop and then get a cab to your destination, but you can get a train to a point. But for us to get to Reading, it was like us the dude at the Amtrak in Philly on 30th Street. He was like, yeah, a train hasn't been there for like 30 something years, and we looked at each other like, what the fuck are we going? Like it was incredible. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of trains and shit. I'm not. I've probably said it on a few podcasts previously, like, but I like trains and shit, like, because they bring things together, like, and it cuts out a lot of sort of like traffic pollution and shit and that, and it does link cities, and I think it is good for cities. But obviously, at the same time, as you said, people will jump on the train, come into the town, spend a bit of money, then they leave again. So I don't know. There's a little bit here and a little bit there with how they can work, but yeah. That was just my little.
That's why I love London every time I've been there, because it feels similar to New York City for me.
Yeah.
Because I've always been, going to work, going to hang out, always taking trains, taking the subway downtown to go to CBGBs or whatever. That's always been my lifestyle. So you go to London, it's kind of the same way.
Definitely. It's 100% the same, man. That's why I come to New York City and then be like, I'm gonna go Coney Island, just jump on the train and go Coney Island, because I can. But you go to other places, you're like in America, you're stuck there. So I want to go see this. Oh, you don't have a car. Oh, I'll get the bus. Yeah, the bus stop's an hour away. And that's
the way it is most places. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
But that's how it is, and that's why I've always felt connected to places like New York and London, because I'm so used to that lifestyle. Because having a car in New York City is a pain in the ass.
Yeah, parking is expensive. Just driving into the center of Manhattan or wherever. It's just
I mean, now it's a little different because of COVID, but when things are quote unquote normal,
it's
driving in Manhattan is a nightmare.
Got to pay to, what is it? Is it the Mulholland Tunnel? You got to pay to get into it? Is that the tunnel?
Well, you've got tunnels and bridges. You got the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel. Both of those go between New York and New Jersey, and you got bridges between the different boroughs, Queens to the Bronx, and
you got to pay for all of them to use.
A lot of them, not all of them, but even just say you go drive into Manhattan, even parking is just a tremendous amount of money, because there's no street parking on most days. So you got to go put it in a parking lot and spend good $40 for a day.
See, what I do is I'll drive in. If I'm driving in and I need to be in Manhattan, I will either drive down south past the Holland Tunnel area, like right down to the tip, where you can get like some crappy parking, but it's cheap or free because you're on the street, and I'll walk and I'll take the subway, or I'll go up past or up like along Central Park, but either on the east or the west side, depending on which side I need to be on, and park on the street and then take the subway, because that's the only way you can park in the city without paying $1 million at a fucking lot.
Certain areas you can get street parking, but when you get into like Midtown and downtown where everything is happening, forget about it. You got to put it in a lot and spend a ton of money. Like if you're going to something at like Madison Square Garden or something, forget about it.
Well, for me, if I'm going to something at Madison Square Garden,
it's easy because the train is right there.
Yeah, for me, the train from my town. So I live in like right by Trenton. And there is a train station that goes if the Trenton train, I can either take it north to New York City or I can take it south to Philadelphia from the same spot. So I'm right on the line between the two biggest cities. So I have the option to go either direction without having to drive. I could take a Uber or whatever to the train station if my car was broken or whatever. So getting there isn't that hard for me. And then once I'm in either one, I'm fine. But if I need to go to anything outside of the range of those train stations, I'm fucked.
Yeah. But that was one of the cool things about going to hardcore shows when I started going when I was young, because you had people that would take the trip like Len and come in from New Jersey. You had people that would come in from Long Island. and from Brooklyn and from Queens, and we were coming down from the Bronx, and all of a sudden it was just everybody met at CBGB's or Coney Island High or whatever, and that was the mix. You had all these different people all getting together, and that was cool. And then everybody was drinking tons of malt liquor and making a mess of everything because they didn't have to drive home.
But the other problem is, for me, when I started going to New York City to shows, and I'm talking in the mid-'90s or even late '90s, the price of a round-trip ticket from Trenton to New York City was $12.
Jeez,
no problem.
Cheap.
No problem. At some point, they've raised the price a little bit, and I think it went to $18, and I was like, fuck, this is a little expensive. Now, if I want to take that trip, it's $12 to park, and then I still got to pay $32 for the ticket, and then I still got to pay for a subway pass. So we're already talking, I'm at $50 before I even got to the show. I'm like, yo, I can't even come to your show because that means I still got to pay to get in the show. I'm going to probably need to eat something. So this is $100 to come watch some band that is most likely going to play at a place
in your
where
town
I can drive.
too. Yeah.
Or
good thing you don't drink.
Even if they played Philadelphia, I could just drive to Philadelphia because you can always park in Philadelphia. That's the difference between Philly and New York City, is that you can always find a place to park in Philly and it won't cost you an arm and a leg. And then I only spent like $10 on gas and I didn't pay anything really for parking, and I just paid to get in. It's much cheaper for me to go to Philly, so I started going to Philly all the time.
Yo, Gary, I was going to mention, we're just talking about New York hardcore. Is New York hardcore's best days behind it? I don't say that in a derogatory way because I know there's still some bands going, some amazing bands, but New York in terms of the boroughs, not Long Island, the boroughs. Do you see any? Do you reckon there's going to be a new explosion of younger bands coming through anytime soon, or has the people who used to make the city up just isn't there anymore? Like,
you know what it is? I think the people are there. I don't think the venues are there, and that's one of the things that I wonder about with COVID and how things will be post-COVID, because you only had really a handful of venues anyway, which has to do with the financials like we were talking about, and the makeup of the city has changed.
Yeah.
A lot of the bars that used to, like, I could probably count over the years. I mean, God, I've been playing in bands almost 30 years now, and I could probably count on one hand the number of venues that I've played in smaller venues, not like a bigger place like the Gramercy Theater or something.
Or Webster Hall or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, not like Webster Hall or Gramercy, but like smaller, like bar type places. I could probably count on one hand the number of places that I've played that still exist now in 2021.
Yes.
And that's after playing on and off over 30 years. CBGB's gone, Coney Island High gone.
Yep.
All these small places.
Wetlands gone.
It's gone,
Wetlands gone. All the places where I used to hang out. And it's just because the makeup has changed, because even places that used to have bands, like the Continental now is gone. But the Continental used to have bands, and then they stopped having bands because they couldn't make money at it anymore. And they just switched to just a straight up bar, and eventually they went out of business because they tore that whole block down and built some whole new apartment building or something. Which has happened with a lot of these places. But the real question is, are there going to be places for these kids to play? Because there's a lot of good younger bands that are still kicking it around the boroughs and just outside the boroughs. But you got, like, I won't start naming names because then I'll leave somebody out and somebody will get hurt about it. But but you've got a lot of good bands, and you got a lot of good kids that are into the scene, and even, you know, I say kids, but even a little older that have been around for a little bit and have been in a couple of different bands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there's no place for them to play. Manhattan, forget about it. Manhattan's shot. All the places that used to be in Manhattan are all gone, and all the new places that are opening up,
they won't have them there.
Are these places where the only way for them to make a profit is to sell a burger that's the size of a quarter for $20. It's how it is because of the way the real estate market is and everything. Because I've talked about it many times. I used to take the bus to work every day when I worked on 32nd Street. I used to take the express bus, and it would go down Fifth Avenue every day and go up Madison Avenue. And I passed an unbelievable amount of storefronts that were just empty. And this was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because it was better for them to leave it empty and write it off.
Yep. Than to take a loss on having low rent.
And also, when I used to work down by the South Street Seaport, I watched all these mom and pop stores go out of business and put a note in the window, "Thank you for supporting us for 30 years. Unfortunately, they want to triple our rent. So we have to leave, but thank you for supporting us all these years." And then suddenly it's another fucking Chipotle.
Yeah.
Or some weird, quarter-sized burger spot like I was talking about. Some gourmet, grass-fed shit.
They give you like 2 fries on the plate as well, that sort of shit.
Yeah, exactly. For $15. So that's the real problem, because now COVID has made it even worse. Like we were talking about before with small businesses, like how can you even operate a small business when, say, you own a bar and or a restaurant, and you can't have people inside the restaurant. Everything is takeout. Your takeout numbers are not nearly what they were, and forget about it if you were a place that depended on live music. So now what? Do you even exist anymore? There are some places that have already closed up. There's other places that I hear through the grapevine are going to close up any day now.
They're just waiting to announce it, I guess.
Well, because we're at a year at this point. Everything closed up in March. We're in the middle of February now.
And there's no end in sight. Yeah.
And there's no help from the government. I should say there's no help. There's minimal help from the government.
Yeah.
Because like the help that you were talking about that you get on a personal level from your government, we're not getting any of that. And I guarantee you the businesses aren't getting much. Because
small businesses ain't getting shit.
The small businesses are getting very little, and even if they get something, much like what we talked about with the stimulus payments, like, listen, they gave us $1,200. You know what $1,200 does for us?
Fuck all.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Fuck all. Yeah.
There's a lot of people that can't even pay their rent with $1,200.
Especially if you live in New York City, like, yeah.
Exactly. And so that's a bunch of shit. So if you add all of that stuff together, I don't know what the venue situation is going to look like once COVID finally goes back under its rock. So
it's going to be a mess.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be years, and I don't want to be one of these old dudes, but I am. It's never going to be what it was for us when we were younger. Just because the culture of the city is different now.
Yeah.
But I say that as a kid that used to drink 40s on the corner, and you certainly can't do that anymore. There's cameras everywhere. The whole lifestyle is completely different now.
You know what I'm saying? When I was, it's not exactly the same vibe, but it is. It's a weird thing because I never went to New York when I was young. First I went to New York was in 2008 or 9. And that was obviously, things were, for me, it was great being in New York because it was like, oh shit, I'm in New York City. Like, it's fucking, there's steam coming out of the roads from the subway and shit. Like, it felt like I was in that fucking film, like I was in my scene.
Yeah.
But coming back years afterwards, you start seeing the little changes. Start walking around Williamsburg, walking through fucking like the L train, like towards just basically Brooklyn, just changing a lot. Like you can just see it.
Oh, that area over there by the L train has changed tremendously.
Like, yeah, it's crazy.
I dated a girl that lived in that area. I dated her a little over 20 years ago now, and I walk through that area and I don't recognize any of it.
Yes, it's all gone. I mean, I walked past an area which is heavily sort of Hispanic and like Spanish and shit with the vibe, and then you walk around another block and it's just like being in a different world. It's just like fucking your street art murals and shit, and there's people selling fucking bagels for like fucking for $10 and that, like it's just a fucking bagel with cream cheese, but it's $10. They just sprinkle some shit over it. But when I went to Berlin, the vibe that I got from Berlin, it just felt like, oh man, it feels like what New York probably used to be like.
Right.
Just that rough, not like just not in terms of crime, but just that edge of like you just feel like you're free, and it just feels cool that you're here in the city.
Because New York now is so it's squeaky clean compared to what it was. And I feel.
I'm telling you, when I was a kid going to New York City, it was fucking dangerous.
Oh, well,
yeah, no doubt.
Take it back. Like
I'm not gonna be trying to talk as if like with rose tinted glass that New York was so cool, because if you listen to hip hop in your bedroom, like yeah, of course New York sounds cool, but when you hear and you see the pictures of the fucking subway trains with graffiti everywhere, and people just getting beat up, and fucking all the tenement blocks on fire and shit, and there's gang fucking violence, and there's all sorts. I mean, from the 70s to the 90s, it was pretty wild, isn't it? But obviously, out of that, you get the New York hardcore scene grew out of that fucking crazy sort of fucking environment. So,
well, yeah. That's another thing, because if you look at the city, that's a way to look at it. But also, if you look at actual hardcore shows, it was a lot more rough and tumble back then.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to get into one of these, well, back in my day, but it's just how it is, because, you know, listen, you guys had a song called Pavement Strong.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a term that applies to this, because when I was going to hardcore shows when I was younger, there were a lot of fights, a lot of shit used to go on, and there were certain places where it was a free-for-all. Like, dudes would catch a beating, nobody's stopping it, there's no cameras, there's no nothing.
Yeah,
it's rough, but also you get that strength from that. Like, that makes you a little harder.
No doubt.
And, you know, I'm not saying that we all came out of there like some fucking gangsters or some shit, but you go and you see shit and you do shit and you get into shit.
Yeah.
And it makes you, you know, you build a shell. And the whole environment now is not what it was, which in some ways is good, in some ways it's bad. It's certainly safer.
Safer, yeah. No one wants to catch a beating, but it's...
But that also is something that kind of shapes you in a way.
All the wars happen on Facebook now and Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the road, because back then when you had a problem with somebody, you were face to face with them. Now you're sitting there clicking on a fucking keyboard.
Yeah, that's it.
And it's a different lifestyle, and I'm not saying that to take away from anybody, but even for me, like, I grew up in the Bronx and taking the train. Like, you ever see the movie The Warriors?
Yeah, I've seen The Warriors. Great film. Yeah.
So when I used to go out to L'Amour's in Brooklyn, that was like The Warriors in reverse, because we would get home and like the sun's coming up, because that shit was a trek, because the trains run like once an hour late night, and the shows out there were going till like 2-3 in the morning. So getting back to the Bronx, it's just like when they would say Coney Island's 50 to 100 miles from here. Like, it was the same thing for us, just coming back from Brooklyn back to the Bronx. It was that long ass trek, but we did it because we wanted to go see Life of Agony or Typo Negative or whoever was playing out there. So that's what we did. But the lifestyle is so totally different now that it's never going to be the same. I'm sure there's going to be young bands, and I'm sure there's going to be good bands. It's just different because living nowadays is different.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Because there weren't, you know, even before my day, like back in the early days of like Agnostic Front and stuff, everybody was in the Lower East Side in squats, living in squats and like
rats
shit like
all
that. Yeah, like I never lived any of that. Like that was already starting to die down as I was getting into hardcore. So they would probably say the same thing for me, like that I'm not hard like that because I didn't have that lifestyle. It's just that progression in how it is.
Yeah.
And as far as what the future holds, like I said, COVID is a big part of the problem. But then beyond that, just looking at it lifestyle wise and like the finances, the real estate market and things like that, like
is that why a lot of stuff is pushed stuff out towards towards Long Island? Because
like I was starting to say before, Manhattan's kind of shot. There's really no small venues in Manhattan. You had venues out in Brooklyn. You had places like St. Vitus is in Greenpoint, and you had the Kingsland, which was near there also. You had Blackthorn that used to be in Queens, but they closed. And you had some other venues out in like Brooklyn and Queens. The Bronx hasn't had a venue in quite a while, but that's because the Bronx is always kind of far out.
Yeah.
For people. Mm-hmm. So people would complain, I'm not going all the way to the Bronx. That's
a universal thing in hardcore scenes all over the world. I'm not going there, it's too far. People would say that about Staten Island, but nobody really remembers Staten Island anyway, so. There's nothing happening on Staten. Are there any big bands apart from obviously Wu-Tang? Is there any big hardcore bands from Staten Island?
Well, Enrage was from Staten Island.
Okay.
And they were probably, I would say, the most well-known. And you had a couple of members here and there of a couple of different bands, like some former members of Sheer Terror and maybe Kill Your Idols. I'm not sure. Were from Staten Island.
But yeah, everything else is
a couple other bands. But I think Enrage was probably the best known Staten Island hardcore band. But then you had, each of the boroughs had their own thing going on, because the Bronx had District 9 and Billy Club and
you guys, yeah,
other bands that came out that were before that. And then Queens had their own thing going on with Leeway and Crown of Thorns, and Brooklyn had Indecision. So each of the boroughs had their own kind of different flavor.
Yeah.
I just don't know what's going to happen now, because it kind of turned into where those venues moved out and were out in the outer boroughs.
That was it.
Those venues have died out just because of COVID, and they may resurrect in some form, but we don't really know, because one of the things that I always thought was very important was that the best scenes had a home.
Yeah.
When I was coming up, you had
somewhere to be.
Yeah. When I was coming up, we had the Bond Street Cafe. I used to work at Tower Records on 4th and Broadway, and the Bond Street Cafe was like 2 blocks away. So like I would take my lunch break and go see a band play, and then go back to work, and then go back to the show when I was done.
Oh, sick! That's pretty cool.
And a lot of old bands, a lot of the older bands that we consider to be formative bands got their start there. Bulldoze started there. 25 to Life started there. Madball played there. I saw a lot of shows there. And that was home, because even if we didn't know who was playing that night, we would go and hang out. And then years later, Castle Heights became that spot. And that was in Queens. And I used to work there also, played there many, many times. And that was the hangout spot. Like, even if you weren't sure who was playing, you could go and hang out.
Yeah.
And Jersey, I know, Len, there were a couple of different places like that over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on which part of Jersey, because Jersey's so big that it had multiple scenes.
Yeah, because you had
the Newark scene, you had Studio One and Pipeline,
you had City Gardens
up that way, and then you had City Gardens down by me, and in between in New Brunswick, you had the Melody Bar, and then you had all the VFW shows that would happen, and they would happen at the same VFWs for many, many years. So maybe they weren't clubs, but they were still gathering places.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a regular spot. Everybody knew the place, and everybody would go just because that was the place to be and hang out with everybody. So,
and, we've had our clubs open and closed, but I mean, most of the ones that we're talking about, Pipeline, Studio One, gone. Melody Bar, torn down, gone. City Gardens, the roof came in recently, but it's been closed since '96.
Yeah,
it's legitimately less than 3 miles from my house. And I thought about buying it many years ago and trying to resurrect it, but I didn't want the headache.
Yeah, that's it, because you might have an ambitious plan to do something, but you pump so much money into it, and then will people come out? There's always that fear, isn't it? Like, will people give a shit?
Well, it's that, but also, like, we're talking about the financial side.
Yeah,
they've made it harder and harder. It's funny because we talk about how they deregulate so many things on the federal level for these corporations. They do the opposite for the small businesses. So if you're running a bar that has bands playing, you got to jump through all these hoops. And I used to see it working in Castle Heights and being friends with owners in other places. You see the bullshit that they have to go through. Like the last night that Castle Heights had shows, everybody knew they were closing. Their last night, the cops raided the place. It's like, you dicks. You couldn't even let us just have the one last night.
Right.
You got to rush the spot and shut the fucking show down. A bunch of bands didn't even get to play. And it was the last night. It's just, they do stuff like that, and you have to jump through all these hoops, and you got to have insurance, and you got to have this, and you got to have that.
Yeah.
You got to have all these permits, and they're constantly busting balls, making it difficult for you to just run the place.
They just don't basically want that type of certain clientele, that type of music there. Is that what it is half the time?
That's what comes into play sometimes. I can't say that it's always the case, but we talked about it when we had Rich Hall on, who used to book CBGBs, because he had done some stuff at St. Vitus in Brooklyn. St. Vitus is a cool place, but it's only a matter of time because across the street, they just opened a building with a bunch of expensive apartments.
Yeah.
Which means that they're going to start complaining about the people hanging out in front of the spot, which means that it's only a matter of time before they start busting their balls, and eventually that's another spot that'll be gone because somebody doesn't want some people smoking cigarettes out front.
Yeah. Here in the UK, I'm not sure if it actually happened or it might happen, but they're going to bring in some sort of legislation that if you knowingly move to an accommodation, so if you buy a house or an apartment or something and it's near a music venue, you can't sue or turn around and say this is hampering my what's it called, my comfort of living, and that you can't, because people would do that. They would move to a place, or a new build would appear, and there'll be a venue across the road or next door to it, and all of a sudden this venue is now under threat because people have moved into a place knowing that they're moving next door to a venue.
Oh, sure. That happens all the time here, but they'll never pass a law like that because in the end, it'll turn into lawsuits and the lawyers will make money.
Yep.
And that's what they want.
Yeah. And then if your bar is already struggling and you're not making any money, what are you going to do?
Well, that would be like me. I live in this apartment and I've been living here for a couple of years now, and it may come across once in a while. Right outside of the window next to me are some train tracks.
Yeah. And
there are Amtrak trains that go by during the day. And what if I moved in here and then complained about
the Amtrak? Yeah.
Like I grew up in an apartment building across the street from a firehouse.
Yeah, so you can hear it.
You move in there, it's like, okay, you're probably going to hear the sirens late night. That's how it is.
Yeah.
But what am I going to do? Sue the FDNY because of the noise?
I can't sleep. Yeah.
But when it comes to music venues and stuff like that, that's their excuse to either hike up rent or tie them up in a lawsuit, which is going to effectively kill them because who has money to throw at lawyers for a year? Exactly. Or just find some other way to get rid of them. And that's what you deal with as a small business owner. And that's why, like I said, when it comes to hardcore, like the bands, that's the easy part. Kids are always going to be angry and want to make noise. But it's not always easy to find a place to go and not just
to make the noise,
not just be able to make the noise, but also to build a community and hang out with like-minded people off of the fucking internet and actually interact face to face and play and and share that experience, which to me is something that was always unbelievably important.
Yeah.
So that's really, you know, the long answer to your question, but that's the bottom line. Will hardcore survive? Of course it will. But where? Is it going to go back to
underground shit
and kids having basement shows in Jersey because there's nowhere else to go? Maybe. I don't know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
And I hope that it's going to be an experience similar to what we had when we were younger, and not just live streams all day. You know?
Yeah.
I am part of the live stream community.
Listen, I'm not into live streams, but there's something to be said, and because long before I started going to hardcore shows, I was into metal, and I started going to arena shows. And there's something to be said, whether it's an arena show or a tiny place. There's something to be said for that interaction, face to face, as opposed to the live stream stuff is cool. Watching stuff on YouTube is cool, but nothing is ever gonna match the energy of that interactive face to face, and nothing.
Playing live, yeah, it's true.
Out more than COVID, because now it's like I know so many people that are craving that, whether they're musicians or even just fans. Like I would just kill. I don't care if I'm playing. I would love to just go out and see a band at this point.
Band, yeah, same. I would.
You know, because that experience, like, there's an energy to that experience that is unmatched, and that was. Like we talked about gateway drugs and stuff, and like you being exposed to Limp Bizkit and that being the gateway into other stuff. Like I was really into music, and then from the first time I saw a concert, I was just like, whoa. And then when I went to my first hardcore show, then I was really like, whoa, because that was a different kind of energy, even from seeing Metallica in a stadium or Iron Maiden in an arena.
Yes.
So I just had two anecdotes to add to things that were said before we get too far away. So number one, I actually grew up across the street from a firehouse from the age of 12 till I was about 24, 25, maybe even 26. Literally, I could see the firehouse from across the street from me. By the time I was like 15, I didn't even hear the sirens anymore.
Because you so used to it, yeah.
My friends would come over. Anything.
Yeah, my friends would come over and they'd be like, yo, don't you hear that siren? I was like, I did not even know that the siren was going on right now because I have tuned it out. Unless they're coming to my house, I don't give a fuck. So I don't hear it.
I've had people ask me about that with the trains in the back too, because they're pretty loud sometimes, and like the first time my kids were here, and like I've had other people over here, they're just like, whoa, like how can you deal with that? And I don't even flinch. I'm like, yeah, I don't even notice it.
Yeah. And then secondarily, you were talking about people moving in and people complaining about noise. I'm actually going through that issue right now at the studio.
Oh God.
I moved in there over 5 years ago, and I rebuilt the whole place. It's pretty cool inside. But when I moved in, there was nobody to my right or to my left, because we're in an old shopping center, and he was struggling to get like people to move in. So then when I found out that people were moving into my right, I actually went over and I was like, hey, I run a recording studio. It can be really kind of loud here. Is this going to be a problem? And the lady tells me up front, no, I love music. It shouldn't be an issue at all. And I'm like, okay, lady, just wait. And I just was like, all right, cool. And I walked away. Now, 2 years later, after she's been there, now she's sending me like messages like, I don't want to have to cause a problem, but it's so noisy. I don't think I can take it anymore. And I'm like, bitch, you knew what you were getting into when you moved in. You could have moved to another spot in the damn shopping center. There were other open stores, but this was the cheap one. So you felt like you wanted to go with the cheap one. And now this is what you got to deal with. I did strike a deal with her that I would hold 6 hours a week that I would not make noise when she's there because I don't want to be a problem for somebody else. I understand she's got to make money, etc. But it was really irritating to have to deal with it on that micro level. I can only imagine if it was like an actual business where I was doing shows or live events or whatever, and I had to deal with like a whole neighborhood trying
residents.
To
yeah.
Oh, forget it.
Yeah, and that's happened a lot in the UK. Places have shut down, especially London. Places have had to close because of residents moving into an area. It's always the arty-farty types who have moved into a new apartment complex, and there just happens to be a venue that's been there for, I don't know, 20 years or something. Yep. Now that's the problem, and they have to move. It's just it's sad. It's really sad.
No, that happens in New York a lot, and at this point, the venue will lose just because there's more money to be made. Because what are you going to make more money with? A bunch of punk rock kids, or selling shit by the bottle?
Yep, selling shit by the bottle.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And selling appetizers for like $25. This is just how it is.
One bite appetizers.
But that's the whole thing. The lifestyle overall has changed so much that it's impossible to make money doing that anymore.
Yeah, for real.
So it just prices the underground out.
Do you feel you will ever leave New York, Gary?
I've thought about it. I honestly, I thought about it more with COVID, just because it's such a mess, and COVID is really tough, and I'm sure London is the same way. COVID is really tough for New York because our whole lifestyle
is moving,
is
constant,
being on top of each other.
Yeah.
Like my whole life, I've taken crowded subways to work.
Yeah.
So now the idea that can actually be a health hazard is just mind blowing.
Yeah.
But it goes again to the change in lifestyle, that so many things have changed. And I would hope that if something like this happened again, we would be better able to handle it as far as the federal government and things like that. But who really knows? Because the truth is, this proved more than anything that we can't necessarily count on them.
No, you're right.
So
at
the same time, like I said, my lifestyle has always been kind of, I like the city. I grew up here. I've been to plenty of places where it's a lot quieter.
Yeah.
And I just, it kind of drives me crazy sometimes. Like, I'm used to the noise. Growing up across from a firehouse, if there's no noise, I don't feel at ease. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I gotta sleep. I gotta sleep with a fucking fan on now because I used to live on a main street as a kid, and once we moved away from that street, I no longer had the cars driving by and the firehouse making noise and the neighbors making noise, and I'm like, I can't sleep in this silence. I need some kind of fucking white noise right now.
Oh shit!
I'm the same way. I sleep with the TV on a lot of the time because now where I live, I'm kind of in this isolated little area where it's very quiet, and I'm still in the Bronx, but it's more quiet than I'm used to. So I sleep with the TV on half the time just because I need something. Like, I'm so used to noise and being around noise, and like I said, growing up that way, like I could sleep through anything.
That's mad.
Like,
same.
When I was younger and going on tour and like traveling to other states and stuff, like sleeping on some kid's couch, like I'll fall asleep no problem. Why? Because I'm used to noise and being less than comfortable. Maybe a little less now because I'm pushing 50 and I'm tired of that shit.
Yeah.
And my back can't take it. But same difference. It's just I'm used to it. I love it, but at the same time, I don't feel connected to New York like I used to because, like we're talking about with the lifestyle and the places, like I don't connect to the city the same way anymore.
Yeah.
Because even when it comes to like, just another example, like all the places that I've worked for, almost all of them don't exist anymore, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's kind of.
But it's just they've either closed up or they've been swallowed up into another company.
Yeah.
So like practically every job that I've ever had either doesn't exist anymore or is part of some merger or something. Because I used to work in the music business, and like I used to work for record labels, and like all those labels have all been folded into these other bigger things. And like I used to work at Tower Records, like I mentioned, and used to work in a bookstore, and that whole chain went out of business also.
Would you work for Borders?
I worked for Walden Books, which was owned by Borders.
Okay.
Yeah, Borders is done now, isn't it?
Yeah, Borders went out of business years ago. And like I used to work for Capitol Records, and the division where I worked got swallowed up and merged, and like EMI and Sony merged. So like that's all part of a big merger. Like I used to work for a website that got bought by Grubhub and dissolved into Grubhub. And like others, Tower Records went out of business years ago. I used to work at the Virgin Megastore in Times Square. They going out of business. Like,
yep.
All these places, it's like I said, it's like all the venues where I used to go, all gone. All the jobs where I used to work, all gone. Like the city is
not what it was.
It's very different from what it was when I was growing up, and even when I was older. Because, like I said, I'm 47 now, so it's different even from what it was when I was in my 30s.
I wonder how Generation Records is kept keeping along during this pandemic days as well. Like, because obviously record stores are still pretty cool in how they are, but how many people go out and buy records these days unless they're going to a show and shit? They
still seem to get a decent amount of business, and I think one of the things that they did was smart. That is something that some businesses didn't do, is that they really got into the online thing.
Yeah.
I know they do a lot of online stuff. So I think that is something that's definitely helping them keep the doors open.
Yeah, that's good. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, because listen, when I went down there talking about neighborhoods that have changed, when I used to go to Tower Records to work, there were a bunch of other record stores all around there. Like where Generation is, like that whole block used to be record stores.
Record stores and just other stuff.
Yeah, and St. Mark's Place, which was over a little bit. Mm-hmm. There used to be a bunch of record stores all on that strip there too, right where Coney Island High was. And all of it's gone. Like now it's all like fancy restaurants like I was talking about. Like, and not even just record stores, like St. Mark's Comics used to be there. I used to go there and buy comic books. There used to be like vintage video game stores. There was one right across from Coney Island High that I used to go to, selling like old Nintendo systems and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool.
All that stuff is gone. Now it's all restaurants and stuff like that. And
yeah,
it's just not, even the restaurants, I used to go to bars over there too, but now those bars that are there cater to a different crowd.
Yeah, different scene.
So it's not at all like it was when I used to hang around down there. But would I ever leave? I don't know. I've thought about it. I'd consider it at this point. If I could find a place where the job market was right and everything was right, I would still want to do something musically, so I would never end up in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like I would still want to see.
You ain't got to Nebraska.
Yeah, I would still want to see music and play with people. So I'd never end up in the sticks. But COVID has me thinking about it a bit, and then I don't know. I have to see how everything turns out once things get somewhat back to normal.
I'm a London boy, born and bred here all my life. I've never thought about living anywhere else. I remember my dad one time wanted to move to a place in the middle of England called Corby, which is near a town called Northampton. He was thinking about wanting to move there, but I was like, I think I was in my early 20s, and I was like, I can't move to I'm in my early 20s. Like, you can't expect me to just move out of where all my friends and like my job and everything is here. So that never happened. I've lived in different places throughout London, not a lot, but a few places. So the idea of moving somewhere else that isn't London is kind of scary for me. Like, I mean, it might happen. I always say never, but at this current point, I'm still going to be London. Could I move to another country? I don't know as well. It's a big step. Like, I'm 35 years old. Like, I know some people can relocate very easily, but creature of habits.
I couldn't do it for a permanent move.
Yeah.
I could move somewhere in the U.S., but I don't think I could move to another country. And if I had to move to another country, it would have to be like Canada or England or somewhere where English isn't looked down upon as the inferior language.
You're not moving to Paris.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I've always said if there was one place that I've been outside of the United States that I would even consider moving to, it would probably be London.
Yeah.
Just because, like we talked about before, like feeling a little bit of connection with like the old New York in a way. London has that feel in some areas. So
starting to lose. Yeah, it's there, but we're starting to lose that slowly as well, man.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Well, before we wrap this up, one other thing that I was thinking about, because you were talking about a little bit as far as growing up in London, looking at it from different perspective, living in a different country and having kind of a different upbringing to a point. What was your experience like growing up as far as racism goes?
Honestly, never experienced no racism growing up where I'm from. So obviously, London is similar to New York, but very different because you guys are like, I mean, I've even heard that places like Philly are still kind of segregated as well, like in terms of the parts that you're from. Like South Philly's more Italian and shit, and there's other parts that are more Hispanic and more black, but London has its bits where you have an Asian community. So you be in Tower Hamlets, like that's where Jack the Ripper, if you've heard of Jack the Ripper, that's where Jack the Ripper's from, that area, Whitechapel. That's predominantly South Asian, Bangladeshi, like Muslim. Okay. And then you go to somewhere like Brixton. Eddie Grant, he wrote a tune about a place there called Electric Avenue. Yeah, that's predominantly black. And then you go to some place like, I don't know, for example, maybe Dagenham, which is like East London, where I live, not too far from, but close to, that is predominantly white. So you do have your areas which are like that. It used to be more so in the 80s, 90s, it would be more segregated. But over the years, people have just obviously started moving out to different parts of London, and there's always been like a mix of people. Obviously, more mix of coloured people. I hate using that term, but people of colour, sorry, I should say, living just together, and then obviously with white people as well. Whereas places in America, you get that, but not so much. It's very much more segregated. But for me, growing up, I didn't experience any racism, man. That's like legit. Obviously, yeah, you'd experience some people saying some stupid shit, or if you went to an area that you know isn't predominantly one certain colour or whatever, you might hear the odd joke being made or whatever. But out and out racism, like getting chased down the street or house getting attacked or anything like that, never happened to me. But then on the flip side, I won't want to speak for anyone, but Wema, who's in Knuckle Dust, he's obviously a few more years older than me. He grew up around the same sort of place where I've grown up and lived, and he experienced some shit when he was growing up. But obviously, he's a little bit older than me, so things were a little bit different in his time. But in my time, I didn't experience nothing. I'm actually kind of blessed that I managed to grow up with different cultures, different backgrounds, people from different places around the world, and we all just seem to get on. I'm not naive. I know shit did happen. People did get some shit that happened to them, but me, I was like Benetton, man. I was with everyone. I was United Colours, so everyone just got on with each other, man. So it was good.
That's good to hear. I'd much rather hear that than that you had to deal with some bullshit.
Yeah.
Hey, Len, who would have thought other cultures are more advanced? I never would have guessed.
I would have never once thought of that.
That's what I'm saying, because when I walked through Philly one time, and
Philly is terrible.
I remember said it was like, yo, if you go down this block, that's more like the Italian area, and that. Then if you go down one of these blocks, that's where all the Spanish people live, and then you got more black people, and you got like an Irish part as well. And I'm like, fucking hell, what year is this, man? I thought you guys were over this shit. Like, and that's like a cosmopolitan city like Philly. Like, I mean, it's not New York, it's not London, but it's still Philly. That's like, it's a big city, and you'd think that there'll be a mix of people of different cultures living as a melting pot together, but no.
No way.
Nah. I just find it mad like that. It's fucking... People pretend that racism and race issues have disappeared in America, but like they're more prevalent than they've ever been. And
for sure.
Over here, we're starting to get a lot more dumb shit coming through, and people are starting to get a lot more intolerant, and people are starting to get hard-ons for statues and shit, rather than standing up for fucking the right thing and just respecting your fellow man, your fellow woman, like your fellow whoever. Just a little bit of respect, man. That's all people want. You don't have to love each other. It goes a long way. Like, you don't have to be best friends. You just we'll breathe the same air. We're all going through the same COVID fucking shit, man. But some people they just want to keep up with this fucking pretense of just nonsense and that, man. And it's sad. But as you said earlier on, it's big business for some people. So as long as there's people being hateful and being dumb, it will continue. But,
that and. Talking about statues, like you could rip the statue down, but that doesn't do anything. Like the brains are still working the same way.
Exactly.
And that's where the real battle is. That's where the real battle is. Like all that stuff doesn't change a damn thing.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
But for me, my experience, I was pretty blessed, man. I went to a school that was mixed. With cultures and shit, primary school, like elementary and secondary school, high school, all mixed. I went to a college that was all mixed, more Asian, but still just a mixture of cultures and shit. Going to work, had no dramas. I've not had to fight anyone, or I've not had to go to any higher up or HR to complain about being racially abused or discriminated against. Never. Yeah, have I been followed around in the shop by security guards? Yeah, of course I have. Of course, it goes. It's part of the course when you're growing up. Even if you're black, Asian, white, just working class in certain cities, you're gonna get followed around because you're undesirable in some people's, especially security. Security see a group of guys hanging together. It doesn't matter what color you are. They see you, they're on you like a hawk. Like a hawk chasing his dinner. But besides that, yeah, I've been pretty lucky, man. I've been lucky. So I never try to feel like I have to make up a story of being a victim of this or being like that. I just be like, no, I've always had good shit happen where I've grown up. So I'm lucky. One of the lucky ones. Some people have not been so lucky, sadly.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. At least that's a real positive thing. And unfortunately, over here, it's a whole different story.
See, if I wanted to, I could grift. I could become like the Hodge twins or something. Go, yo, racism doesn't exist. I've never been racially abused. I could, man. I won't. I won't do that.
Oh man,
it's gonna be your new middle name now.
Hodge. Grift. Yeah, that's real, man.
Well, Louis, thank you for joining us. Enjoyed this conversation immensely.
Thank you for inviting me on, man. As I said, I like to listen to a few podcasts now. You guys are one of them. I listen to Richie and Jotham and Mav on Post America, and then Dan Crayley as well. He's got Getting It Out podcast. So yeah, there's a few that I listen to. Like Brooklyn Blast Furnace. There's a few. So I'm just hoping that we're all doing our own thing, and obviously me and everyone but us. We just like to talk and get our opinions across, because that's all it is like. And obviously, hopefully, people in the hardcore scene or further out of the hardcore scene can just listen to us and hear what we got to say. We're just ordinary people just trying to get by in life and just do positive things. So I'm happy.
Just trying to keep busy.
Yeah.
Sitting around at home.
That's it.
with a lot to say.
Stewing. Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for having me, man. And I wish you guys well. Wish you all the best. And hopefully I can come over and visit, and then all you guys can come over here and visit and play some shows and whatnot and just kick it. And that'll be it. I'm happy to do that.
Do me a favor, plug your show. Make sure that everybody can come find you.
Oh yes, definitely. If anyone wants to come check out our show, which is UK based, talking about music, we interview a lot of bands. We interview other people as well, and we just normally just kick it and talk, just as we're doing now. But it's the Everyone But Us podcast. But it's Everyone But Us, all one word together. You can find us on Instagram. You can also find us on Facebook. If you want to check out my bands, I'm in a band called Ironed Out. We've got music on Spotify, and we've obviously got a band page on Facebook and Instagram, but more on Instagram. And of course, I'm in another band as well, which is a bit more punk rocky, but we're called Think of us like a shit version of No Redeeming Social Value. That's the tagline I'm gonna go with. And with Last Orders Hardcore, not the Nazi bands, but yeah. And a big shout out to Eruption Records. That's the label here in the UK.
Always.
And also my Billy Club was on Eruption Records, in it still is.
Oh yeah.
In a sense, yeah.
And we have a long history with Poppy and
Pierre.
and Pierre keeps killing me with the memes on Facebook all the time.
Oh yeah, that is Pierre all over. Like the fucking Gildan is the quality one, man.
Oh man, always killing me with the Poppy Gildan memes. It never stops. I love it. Still
for Poppy sometimes, man. It's relentless, but yeah, it's all loving it.
Continuing to put out quality content.
Yeah, for real.
Between music and memes.
Of course. And then finally, I'm also part of the Radio Eye Collective. We put on shows, and we're just part of the hardcore scene in the UK, in London and in the UK. So we just want to make sure that everyone, when shows do start again, come to one of our shows, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from that as well. But yeah, that's about it.
I will say once again that I love London. I love going to London. I love hanging out with all you guys when we are in London.
Yeah,
and elsewhere, because when we're on mainland Europe, some of you guys magically appear.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
running into ammo at Yperfest. It was like, oh hey, how you doing? So that's how it is. It's always funny to me that you guys just randomly pop up on the mainland Europe over there.
I mean, the podcast is coming to an end. I could have spoke about it, but we can't do that so easy anymore now because we've left the EU now. But we can still pop up. It can still happen, but we just have to pay now. We can't just rock up anymore.
Always making it difficult for people.
Always.
But so. I know how you guys are, and all my friends over there. You'll find a way.
Exactly. We always find a way.
Even if it means being in the back of a box truck like Billy Club had to do.
Yeah, exactly.
We had to go travel in the back of I guess it was Pierre's work truck.
Oh, okay.
And all the equipment back there. This was, when things were a little crazy.
Yeah.
So he stopped short at one point, and all the equipment fell all over us. And we're in the dark back there, and it stopped short. And sorry, mate.
Yeah, that's it.
The door, and we're all just like splayed out, like all over. It was a fun time. I have photos of that somewhere. It was a classic Billy Club moment. Classic Billy Club ruction moment.
That's it, man.
Louis, thank you once again for joining us.
Gary. Thank you, Len.
Thank you.
TheUpgradePodcast.net for all of the listening links and social media. And that's it. We will see you guys again next week. Peace.
Peace.